directions to the restroom, our protocol team is on standby. Think of them as your human GPS, highly accurate and more reliable than 5G. Bins. For all physical trash, bins have been provided around the venue. Let us keep our environment bug-free. Health and safety. We have medical and security teams on site. If you feel a glitch in your internal systems or detect any suspicious malware in the building, report it to them immediately. Emergency protocol. In the unlikely event of an emergency, do not crash. Simply follow the exit signs to the assembly points.
It's day two. It's day two. It's day two. It's day two. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Ladies and gentlemen, it's day 2 of the 3i Africa Summit, and guess what? We're trending on Twitter, still at number 1. Put your hands together. Let's begin this day in the name of God Almighty, from whom all blessings flow, including life, health, and well-being. We ask that, Lord, you bless us with your blessing and with great wisdom to ensure that all that we discuss will be meaningful to us and that actionable items shall come out of it for the good of our country and the continent. We ask of all this through you, Christ our Lord, with thanksgiving. Amen. And since we're in the house of God, we shall take an offering. Let's do that at the end of this gathering. I ask humbly all our members to my right, could you please fill the center for me? It's beginning to look like the teeth of a growing child. Please be kind and join us right here in the middle. Let's encourage them with a round of applause, please. Thank you very much. If you're joining us on radio, on television, or live here at the Destiny Arena of the Maker South Chapel International, we welcome you to the 3i Africa Summit, where ours is a mission to redefine how Africa invests, Africa grows, and how Africa transacts. My name is Jerry Ajololo, and on behalf of the Bank of Ghana, together with our partners Gibbs, and all the way from Singapore, let me get that name right, GNFS, I say a good morning to you all and welcome to day 2. Today, we happen to have a little overview of how yesterday went. Let me just apprise you all, and then we shall zoom straight into our agenda for today. Yesterday, we were blessed to have with us the Vice President of the Republic, who left us with her blessings for us to deliberate and arrive at very concrete and actionable items. On the issues that were discussed so far, these are just the highlights. It was stressed that we continue to monitor and evaluate effectiveness of digital financial inclusion initiatives in Ghana, to also strengthen collaboration between central banks, regulators, and private sector partners to address emerging challenges in digital finance. Amongst other things, we were urged to promote ongoing training and capacity building for financial sector professionals to adapt to technological changes, to facilitate knowledge sharing and best practices between Ghana and other countries pursuing financial inclusion. We're urged to continue cross-country collaboration to share best practices and lessons learned in digital financial inclusion, to monitor and evaluate the impact of regulatory changes on financial inclusion and digital finance adoption in key regions, as we saw from lived experiences in Asia and Africa. We're urged to encourage further research and data collection on the effectiveness of mobile money and digital financial services in rural and underserved areas. We're charged to promote consumer education initiatives to build trust and understanding of digital financial products. Also to support ongoing dialogue between regulators, financial institutions, and technology providers to address emerging challenges and opportunities. To continue to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of digital payment systems in supporting financial inclusion across different regions. Collaborate with local banks, fintechs, and regulatory bodies to address challenges related to trust stability and digital infrastructure in emerging markets. Assess the impact of regulatory frameworks on digital financial services and propose adjustments to support innovation while managing risks. Encourage ongoing dialogue among stakeholders to share best practices and lessons learned in digital transformation and financial inclusion. And lastly, explore opportunities for cross-border payments, partnerships to enhance payment services and economic development in Africa and similar regions. Today, we build upon this great work that we did by exploring deeper our theme as we get to hear from various perspectives herein gathered. We shall have a foundational keynote, and then we shall zoom into two panel discussions bordering on building functional capacity markets, global investment liquidity, and Africa's path to scale. And finally, AI, open finance, and value creation, building Africa's intelligent economy. Ladies and gentlemen, are we ready? Oh, come on, I can't feel the energy. Are we ready? Is it the AC or what? Please, let's do something quite energetic. Could you please rise with your phones in your hand? We developed a certain app which is currently on your phone right now. It's a little black box with a hole in the middle. I'm kidding, it's your camera. If you could turn your cameras on, ladies and gentlemen, let's do a video. Unless you're using a yam, but please turn on your cameras. Let's do this. This is what I call the 3I Delegates Pledge. Are we ready to do it together? So please turn on your cameras, the video option, and say these after me. I, your name, being of sound financial mind and mostly balanced books, do hereby solemnly pledge I will embrace fintech as a great equalizer and not use it to explain why I was late. I pledge to take fewer selfies than notes and to take the hashtag 3I Africa Summit at least 10 times daily, even if autocorrect keeps changing. I vow to share my fintech stories, the failed pilots, the crashed apps, the regulatory surprises, because in this space, every stumble is a stress test. We survived. I pledge to eat all the free food, drink all the free coffee, and still maintain my composure as a central banker and a fintech professional. I will stop calling everything mobile money. Update a revolution. I vow to network with at least 10 new people and to collect new business cards to fund my fintech startup. Finally, I vow to leave this summit with more than a tote bag containing collectibles. I will leave with a mandate to shape Africa's integrated financial future. One bold idea at a time. So help me, MTN Momo. Put your hands together if you can. Please be seated. And so, charged with this energy, ladies and gentlemen, I believe all is set for us to zoom into the first session for today. We want to achieve a foundation based on how we can harness continental digital public infrastructure for economic development. Here to do us the honor is the Divisional Director for West Africa, Gulf of Guinea International Finance Corporation. Please make welcome warmly, Nathalie Kusai Akon.
I was saying my name is just Kwesi. and not Kusai. Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Ghana. Can you hear me? No? Sorry? Both? Is it better? Okay, good. Let me try to. Okay. Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Ghana, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So my name is Nathalie Kwasi Akon. So it's the Kwesi from Côte d'Ivoire, neighbor country. So let's talk about why we are here today. Internet use in sub-Saharan Africa has grown rapidly, increasing by over 115% between 2016 and 2021. More than 191 million additional people made or received digital payment between 2014 and 2021. But beneath this progress lies a more complex reality. Only about 22% of people actually use mobile internet, despite much wider coverage. Over 60% of people live within broadband reach, but remain unconnected. African firms pay up to 35% more for digital tools than their peers in other regions. And critically, while 86% of firms have access to digital tools, only a small fraction uses them intensively enough to drive productivity gains. This is the usage gap, the affordability gap, and the productivity gap. And without addressing this risk, we risk digital access without economic transformation. It is a pleasure for me to open day 2 of the 3i Africa Summit with such a diverse group of policymakers, regulators, investors, innovators, and development partners. Each of us committed to shaping the future of Africa. And I see also a lot of young people and young faces in the room. This theme the theme of this year, Shaping Africa Integrated FinTech Future, captures an important transition. The first phase of Africa's digital journey was about access and innovation. The next phase is about integration, productivity, and scale. I want to talk about why harnessing continental digital public infrastructure for economic growth is important and timely. Because today the question is no longer about whether Africa can connect. The question is whether our system connects well enough to drive growth, job, competitiveness, and scale. So I will be sharing 3 reflections this morning. The first one is why integration is the only opportunity to evolve from fragmentation to continental scale. The second is what are the challenges and the condition for success. And thirdly, how do we promote public and private partnership model that can really, and the role that organizations like us, IFC, as part of the World Bank Group, can play in that space. So why integration is the only opportunity to evolve from fragmentation to scale and continental growth? Across the continent, digital ecosystems are brilliant, but too often fragmented. Payment platform works, but just not always with each other. Data exists, but cannot move easily or safely. Small business can transact digitally, yet they still struggle to grow, to borrow, or to operate beyond one country, one platform, one market. If Africa does not address this fragmentation, we risk scaling silos or scaling growth. We risk having innovation without productivity and access without prosperity. Integration is the economic shift that turns digital finance into a continent-wide growth engine. This is where the digital public infrastructure becomes central. Today, competitiveness depends not only on roads, port, and energy, but on digital ID, interoperable payments, data exchange framework, and connectivity. They are foundation to economic infrastructure. Interoperable payment, shared digital identity, standard, and trusted data exchange are the invisible rails that make cross-border trade, regional value chain, and the AfCFTA work in practice, not just a paper. Without them, firms remain local by default. African enterprise can reach regional market faster, cheaper, and with greater certainty. And critically, innovation becomes too cumulative. Firms can build on common rails instead of rebuilding the same infrastructure repeatedly. That is how digital systems move from enabling transaction to enabling economy of scale. Even in the financial services, when identity, payments, and data system connect, SME becomes more visible and therefore more bankable. Credit decisions become faster, cheaper. Informal business can formalize, they can grow, and firms can operate once again across platform and border. And more importantly, create jobs. And we know how much Africa needs jobs today. So Africa has shown the world that it can innovate. The question now is whether we can integrate fast enough and well enough to compete. The next frontier is not development of more apps, more platform, but about really the ability of building connected systems that allow Africa's digital economy to grow as one. So how do we address the challenge? What are the conditions of success? Across Africa, more than 40 million MSME and 600,000 formal firms, and even more, 10 times this number of informal businesses who wish to formalize, stand to benefit from a digital transformation. This gain can only be materialized when a digital infrastructure is complemented by skills, electricity, and strong institutions. There's no way around it. And we must be very honest about the reality of Africa. The continent infrastructure gap reflects decades of underinvestment, accelerated by rapid urbanization and rising demand from a growing and increasingly connected population. It starts just by electricity. Today, sub-Saharan Africa countries finance nearly 90% of their infrastructure from domestic resources. That places enormous pressure on government budget. At the same time, the digital divide persists across geography, gender, and firms. Skills gap adoption and regulation fragmentation limit scale. So it is very clear. Digital public infrastructure cannot succeed if these systemic constraints remain unaddressed. So another point is that for DPI to deliver its promises, trust is also non-negotiable. Digital systems must be built with strong governance, clear accountability, data protection, and cybersecurity at the core. Citizens and businesses will only adopt systems they trust. An investor will only commit capital where rules are predictable and safeguards are credible. well-governed DPI that allow openness and competition to coexist with security and resilience. This is also the condition of success. So, and maybe my last reflection is, how do we successfully build a public-private partnership model? Government cannot sustain digital public infrastructure alone. There's no way. Not at the speed and scale that Africa now requires. DPI are capital intensive, they are dynamic, and they are really innovation-driven. So this is where the private sector role becomes essential. The private sector brings long-term capital, technological innovation, and operational expertise, and also the incentive to deliver efficiently and maintain quality over time. When the private sector is not engaged, is engaged not as a vendor, but as a co-architect and a co-investor, DPI can be delivered faster, more efficiently, and with less pressure on public finances. Shared infrastructure models, such as carrier-neutral broadband, independent tower, and data center, are among the most cost-effective way to expand connectivity and competition. This is where institutions like us, as IFC, the institutions that I represent, also has a role to play and can be part of the solution. As a private sector arm of the World Bank, IFC mandate is to mobilize private capital to deliver infrastructures that serve development goals. Over the past decade, we have invested over $9.6 billion in digital infrastructure investments. And we are seeking momentum because the opportunity exists. A successful example is when we provided $100 million finance to Raxio Group, a Pan-African Africa data center platform. The investment supports expansion of Tier 3 certified carrier-neutral facility across country, including Ethiopia, Mozambique, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Cote d'Ivoire, Tanzania and Angola. So this facility underpins cloud computing, digital financial services, and AI, which strengthen the regional integration, but also creates skilled jobs in construction and operation. But most importantly, behind those 100 million directly invested, IFC can mobilize investors into the sector. And this is where we really see our role as a development finance institution. Our infrastructure commitment in Africa have doubled from 1.5 to 3 billion over the last 5 years. And the broader impact is multiplied when commercial bank, institutional investor, and other DFI co-invest alongside. So a partnership model that has proven effective for delivering DPI at scale is one where government provides the enabling policy and targeted public finance. Development finance, like IFC, de-risks, pioneering, and the private sector deliver at scale because we are able to mobilize other investors. So this model strengthens trust, ensure interoperability, and support continent-wide digital integration. So it's not about privatizing public goods, but it's rather about crowding in private capability to deliver public value. When regulation is enabling and predictable, private investment follows and competition deepens instead of narrowing. The 3I Summit, and this is why such summit is important for us, it's really the kind of summit where you can convene public and private actors and align on the next step, the next concrete step on regulation, financing and regional integration that bring Africa digital transformation closer to the vision and reality. So I want to end closer at home. As I say, I'm from Cote d'Ivoire, so I'm almost Ghanaian. And Ghana knows what is possible. From mobile money revolution that brought millions into the financial system, to the tech hubs in Accra, training the next generation of developer, entrepreneur, this country has already shown that digital innovation can change lives at scale. But the greatest chapter is still unwritten. When Ghana's system connects seamless with those of its neighbors, when a young woman in Kumasi can use her digital identity to access credit, sell across border, and build systems and business that employ others in our community, that is when transformation becomes generational. Every interoperability payment rail will build a job. Every data exchange framework we put in place is a loan that we unlock for a small business that will otherwise remain invisible. Every shared digital infrastructure we invest in is a young Ghanaian who does not have to leave to find an opportunity, because opportunity has been built here at home for her. The question before us today is not whether Africa's digital economy will grow. It will. The real question is who builds it, who owns it, and who benefits from it. If we get integration right, the answer can be our people, our fin, our continent. Thank you.
Today, on the 6th of May 2026, with all our powers combined, can we achieve success by establishing the next frontier to shape Africa's integrated fintech future? Welcome to the 3i Africa Summit 2026. It is a joy for me to be here at the second edition of the 3i Africa Summit that is being hosted by the Bank of Ghana. We are doing this in partnership with the Ghana Interbank Payment and Settlement Systems, GIPS, and the Global Finance and Technology Network, GFTA, of the Monetary Authority of Singapore. At the Bank of Ghana, we have taken a deliberate approach. Our objective has been clear, and that is to build a regulatory and market environment that supports innovation while maintaining stability and trust. Africa has reached a point where participation is no longer the ambition. Leadership, on the other hand, is.
This summit reflects the shared ambition for Ghana, which the governor has just spoken about, and for Africa, for us to build a digitally connected financial future anchored on innovation, investment, and impact. When leadership is collaborative, partnerships are intentional, digital financial services moves beyond systems and delivers real impacts. And it ensures that every Ghanaian has access to financial services. And that is no longer a barrier, that is a given.
The next frontier of Africa's financial future is not ahead of us. It is being decided now and in this room by the choices we make here. Ghana is open to partnerships across the continent, and we are ready for business.
It's a real pleasure to be here in Ghana with all of you for what is bound to be a very productive 3 days, full of insights, intelligent conversations, and discussions that can move the African continent forward when it comes to the 3 I's: innovation, investment, and impact. Let us use this opportunity for all of us coming together, and let us collaborate with each other
to turn these insights into action. The next phase of global digital growth must be shaped in emerging markets. Africa is well positioned to play a defining role, particularly in cross-border trade and in applying technology to agriculture, health, education, and public services. Ghana stands ready to contribute to this effort, to ensure that integration is not only discussed in Accra, but also demonstrated everywhere. And I believe you agree to that one.
And such is the power with which we ended day one. Please put your hands together for one and all for making it to day two in such power and strength. Help me appreciate once again Madame Nathalie Kwasi Akon for that great keynote on harnessing continental digital public infrastructure for economic development. I like those tangible examples which show us how interoperability can become not just transformational, but transgenerational. I believe this feeds very perfectly into our next conversation. From platforms to systems, building foundations, scaling Africa's digital finance economy. Here to do us the honor by way of the panel, please make welcome the CEO, MTN Mobile Money Fintech Limited, Mr. Shaibu Haruna. He is joined by the founder and chief executive officer of Onafrique. Make welcome Dare Okujo. Welcome, sir. Joining these two distinguished gentlemen is the founder and chief executive officer of Flutterwave. Make welcome Olubenga Agbola. We make welcome the Group Chief Executive Officer of Jumo, Paul Welton. And moderating this panel, ladies and gentlemen, make welcome the Chief Executive Officer, Fintech Foundation, Professor Chris Brahma. I generally don't like the panel. It's a bunch of hardware, it's no software. Mr. Moderator, try and make it soft for us. Over to you.
Wonderful. Well, this is such a pleasure. Thank you so much to the Bank of Ghana. Thank you so much to GFTN and really the global effort here to assemble some of the finest speakers and thinkers, some would dare say family here, to talk about these issues. I guess we'll just sort of kick this off first with a question for everyone on the panel. I think one of the biggest themes in innovation in Africa writ large is that of leapfrogging and leapfrogging different sort of stages of innovation. But in this particular instance, what exactly are we leapfrogging? When we talk about leapfrogging infrastructure, are we talking about creating something new or just really assembling really impressive parts instead of one impressive system? So I guess we'll just start off with Paul and sort of go through, kick it off with everyone, and then jump into your individual issues.
Thanks, Chris. I think I do agree that we've seen a lot of leapfrogging in Africa. If you think of mobile money that started in Kenya, that's an incredible piece of hardware and software that we've seen now translate into other countries like Ghana. And my friend on the panel, Mr. Shaibu, they are running a very, very impressive mobile money system. I guess the question for me is like, when we leapfrog, are we doing that out of necessity? Or is it something that we've actually thoughtfully set out as a strategy? And I think that's one of the concerns that is hindering Africa to get into that systematic thinking. Because quite often something gets born out of necessity. It's a great innovation, but instead of harnessing that strategically, we actually imitate and try to just keep that closed loop.
That's super interesting. So, is it demand-driven leapfrogging, or is it proactive or defensive? Super interesting. GB.
So for me, leapfrogging in my own little sphere is really about how do you go from 1 to 10 and not go linearly, depending on the market you're looking after. For example, I'll use Nigeria as an example. Nigeria or most of Africa went from no phones to mobile phone. That's leapfrogging, right? We didn't go through the landline era at the scale you find elsewhere in the world, right? That's leapfrogging. So for me, it's really just helping a small business in Lagos sell globally and expand their reach without expanding their shop, right? That's leapfrogging. So to the common guy on the street is really, how do you make money transfer so simple that sending money home to my mother is as simple as sending an email. That is leapfrogging for that guy who wants to get that money there on time. So really it's about making impact in a not so linear way, in my opinion.
Leapfrogging, sir.
No, thank you. Actually, I'll go to the other part of your question. Are we building great pods or are we building a system? And I think beyond the leapfrogging, it is a system that is emerging. And is emerging in the sense that we are able to now merge markets for entrepreneurs. It's the same way today in the first wave of digital economy, your ability to put up a website, expand your market dramatically from, instead of having a shop that only can serve people around you. I think what we're doing in the digital payment side is by connecting markets, we are also expanding markets. So for entrepreneurs, that website not only can serve here in Ghana, but can serve in Togo, all the way to South Africa. So it is beyond the leapfrogging for me. I think it is really achieving that view of the one Africa that is now within reach.
Can I just follow up very, very quickly on that? Because we heard on the one hand, this question of not skipping steps that GB was sort of identifying, and really acceleration. And you're talking about connecting different sort of pieces of markets. I'm just already fascinated that we haven't necessarily jumped directly into the technology question, that all these different pieces, when we're talking about systems, that we're not yet going to that specific question, but you went to markets first. Why markets as sort of your initial point of departure when you think about leapfrogging?
Yeah, because I mean, no one wakes up and says, I feel like paying. Payment in itself is not, there's no demand for payment. There's demand for exchange of goods and services. So you always have to start from markets. And you also have to remember that, just the fragmentation of Africa dealt bad hand to some people. I'm from Benin. It's a relatively small market. So if you wake up and you have an idea in Benin, you are at a disadvantage as someone who had the same idea in Nigeria next door, because your market is just too small. And so for me, that's why connecting market, merging market is so profound. And that is what is behind it. Payment is a consequence of that. And while we were able to connect market from telecommunication point of view, from transportation point of view, if we don't connect market from payment point of view, it will be incomplete.
Interesting. Leapfrogging. Can you leapfrog this conversation?
Well, I'll try. For a moment, I thought I was in a classroom to talk about leapfrogging.
You in the back row.
I know. So, look, I'll start from maybe a conceptual thought around it first, and then I can come down to the bit around payments, right, and the fintech ecosystem at large. For me, leapfrogging is a very simple terminology, and the way I look at it, you can look at it in a very simplistic term, which is to say, are you actually just growing exponentially, or you are actually just growing incrementally, right? And oftentimes when new technology is introduced, everybody jumps on it. Everybody wants to be seen to be doing something or try to be doing something. And we all end up doing the very same things, right? I recall, many years ago, when the whole internet explosion came about, everybody suddenly wanted to have an internet cafe, for instance, right? And we busy built internet cafe businesses that were cannibalizing each other. Now, how do we build on technology that is able to deliver exponential change in our environment? And that is a very fundamental question, to drive this discussion forward, to say, look, what kind of, I can liken it to building a road network, right? When you're building a road network, first and foremost, you ask yourself, do you want to build the main artery? And then how do you connect the feeders into the artery? So leapfrogging means that you are building the main artery and then ensuring that these arteries are also connected with each other to achieve exponential growth. So that the example that was given here to say, if I'm a fintech in Benin, as small as the market is, I'm able to, and you can liken it to a feeder, I'm able to then connect to that bigger pipe, which perhaps sits in Nigeria, and which also extends to another bigger pipe, maybe sitting in Nairobi, and that extends it. So for me, it's about how are we building, and let's be deliberate about how we build by saying we'll build a bigger rails, and we see how we connect, so that we create a whole ecosystem that supports that acceleration, so that the benefit of it can inure to the common good and at scale.
I love that, and I think one thing that you're getting at, to use one metaphor, at what point do pipes become plumbing, right? And at what time do the little pieces end up becoming a system? And I guess I'll pivot back to Dari very, very, very quickly to build off of this idea. You can use different metaphors, of an archway and building. Mobile money has made tremendous advances, certainly, in the last decade. And now we're having, I should be noted, this new spate of innovation that is enabling, and I love this idea, transformation, but the question is who's capturing that transformational value, right? It's change, but who's capturing the value of that change is a big question. When you think about what those technologies mean, obviously you've connected a lot of wallets in really innovative ways. But again, we do have this foundation, if one will, of mobile money. Is that foundation something to be built on, or is it something to be built around? Is that foundation pipes or plumbing? And Shabby, please do feel free to hop in as well if you have some perspective.
Please, you want to
Okay, so look, if we use that analogy, I think first and foremost, you can look at the interoperable system as well as the mobile money system as your plumbing, right? And it is so because you want to also be able to connect, because you don't want to keep the silo in terms of one mobile money operation and everybody is dependent on it. You want to be able to create that big pipe which connects to another big pipe, which is the interoperable layer. And then on top of that, a lot of other things can also be built around it. And you create that universal ecosystem, not just in one market, but across different markets, so that system to system can connect and can seamlessly transact. So I think that we have built, and over the years, collectively as an industry, in partnership with our regulators, we've built that foundational, big pipes. Now, how do we layer on at scale? Because sometimes it almost feels like everybody wants to build one thing, and we end up all crowding out in one area, forgetting that the bigger opportunity is about how we connect. Because you can have a lot of businesses that are able to pipe a lot of things into the main artery that delivers at scale, and where what matters most at that level is the resilience and ensuring that that system is always available and of course at a lower cost to the end customer. So we tend to, I think the focus for us should shift around the big pipes into how are we serving the customer. So at the point of serving the customer, that is where the biggest innovation should be. And that is where we should be playing. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. And as Shaibu was talking, I was reflecting. And, I came to payment from telecom, and I'm always a telecom. And when we all came here, we all were able to check our emails. But did anybody worry about who made the Wi-Fi routers? And we have to keep that in mind, right? To say, like, there are layers you need to achieve the utility. And the utility is exchange of goods and values, as we say. There need to be layers of things that make that universally accessible. And we can argue who's the router, who's the signal, where, how, but that's the kind of layers that needs to happen. And mobile money, for me, is as the foundation of that. It is the most common form of current account in Africa. We are over 1 billion of those people in Africa who use it. It is actually, for many, the first time they form a formal relationship with financial institutions. So we cannot discount it. I think, so to your question, are we building around it or on top of it? We have to build on top of it. Now, we also have to recognize what it cannot do. So we have to recognize that also our bank account did not just become interoperable until there were some sort of schemes that were put on them. Some of them, most of them actually private, right? Visa, MasterCard, SWIFT to some extent. What is the equivalent for mobile money? And until we put that layer on top of it, this ability to really get to the utility, exchange of good and value, will be limited. But we have to be proud of what we've done over the last 20 years, only 20 years, by the way, to put that first foundation that is widely spread and understood. But if we stop there, again, we will have missed the point.
You've this idea of a SWIFT for mobile money. I'm going to have to sort of think that through. That's really interesting. GB, you've built and really revolutionized payments, and you built both around and in very complex payment environments. So I'm going to change the question up just mildly, particularly if we have something as provocative as this question of transformational value in mobile money. If you were going to think through what possible transformations would deliver, one thing that would deliver the most value, what piece of plumbing or additional pipe would sort of get to transformational change in a way that normal people can see the most?
When Daddy was speaking about when people got here, they go on the Wi-Fi, and no one cared about the Wi-Fi router or how it works. It's a very profound thing to say, very, very, very deep. I think a very deep point about that is when pipe becomes plumbing, right? It's invisible, right? Nobody sees it anymore. They just use that. It goes from infra to utility, right? Which is very, very key. And I think from that angle, if I think about it very deeply, the only mobile money provider in Africa that I think have done that well, my own view, maybe MTN and M-Pesa, where no one thinks about how you want to send money. They just send the money, right? It just gets there. So I think what I would love to see is that suite for mobile money is a very big deal, actually, because today, if I'm sending money across banks in Europe, I don't really care which platform it's on. Putting the higher band, money moves, and money moves literally real-time seamlessly. The same needs to happen as well in Africa, but with that can be done. Today, we are Flutterwave. We have to do an integration to every mobile money network in Africa to be able to give our merchants one single platform to receive payments. And that's the fragmentation of African payment, which is a huge cost that we're paying today, right? So, and in each of those mobile money infrastructure, we have to get license in every country for it. So to do MTN mobile money in Ghana, I've got to get a BOG license. MTN mobile money in Uganda, a Ugandan license, another infrastructure, another MTN group API, get approval per country, get commercial per country, and it's all of that could be just one API, one pricing, one license, and you're done. So when the version of GB or Dire in Europe is starting a fintech company, It's one API, one license, one integration. They will spend way less cost. They have a bigger market, right? One regulator. So I think that's what I would actually like to see. We didn't experience that. We had to go through the 10 years of hard work of going to one country one by one, getting licensed, getting integrated, building the compliance framework. But to be great that in the next wave of African fintech, folks can actually get one license across the continent. What I want to do in web money integration, just one web money plugin that I have to do. And I can behind the scene, I have MTN web money across Africa, I have M-Pesa, I have Airtel money. That would be really, really great to have because the cost of capital is high. The maintenance infra you have to build to maintain that infrastructure is also very high. There's some market that I have today that are not really high volume markets, but I have to maintain them, right? To give my customer that one API, right? In reality, if you look at the entire continent, maybe if you count 5 large markets, that's everything, right? But why am I having to get a license in a country where the size is not really, it can be aggregated, right? So that would be one thing that I think we should, which I think has already started. There's this Ghana, Rwanda, licensing thing. I hope that comes to reality very soon. There's this, so those things are very key. If that is a very profound plumbing fix. That if you can get that done, the pipes can start to flow.
So I'm hearing a couple of really useful things. As Lubinga knows, I'm also a professor over at Georgetown where I teach law, and I tell my students, if no one sees you, you're doing your job well, which is sometimes a little bit difficult for both students and lawyers to know. But ultimately, we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about plumbing, but we're also talking about an impact for that plumbing that at its best is invisible. But you're talking about a kind of a plugin right now that isn't necessarily market-based. It's not necessarily even technology-based. You're talking about a regulatory plugin, and whether or not that regulatory plugin can help to scale, and that's something I want to certainly get into. But Paul, I want to make a slight shift. As we move not just out of the plumbing, but into this question of what's the real world impact for people. I really like the idea of asking. We so often think about back end and plumbing issues as the kind of B2B work that no one ever sees, but really pushing even how we think about B2B being something that has real implications for the consumer and for the customers is important. But when you think about perhaps one of the most important vectors that normal or real everyday people see, it's access to credit and the degree to which fintechs have really been at the forefront of thinking through access to credit. And Jumo has been super impressive with $10 billion really put to work for customers. But it's still no small secret that the cost of credit is still very expensive in Africa and in the region, even as fintech has delivered some important wins and gains. What do you think are the primary challenges when you look back at the last decade of innovation? Or is this a data problem, a capital problem, a challenge that we haven't discovered yet? What do you think are the barriers?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think certainly all of us here that have started businesses would know that starting a fintech or any sort of startup, it's an expensive thing to do, and you need to fund that. But it's more challenging in the digital credit space because you've got two challenges and from a funding perspective. So when we talk about capital, you need working capital to get yourself up and running, but you also need the capital to go to the customers to prove the point. So what we realized very early in our journey 10 years ago is that when you pitch an idea, and 10 years before the AI revolution, that we are going to use AI to score and give customers credit, the banks could not handle that kind of conversation. They ran away and said, go prove that, come back when you've proven it. And that's very expensive to do because what ends up happening is you fund that with equity, and usually that equity comes from offshore, and you've got a big FX gap. So now you end up like just to get investors whole, you're pricing out of the market. And that's got a negative impact on the customer, because what we have seen over the last decade is that high-risk customers priced lower actually turn into low-risk customers. And it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that maybe you're creating the profile instead of actually doing that. Now, you fast forward now 10 years later, and you can see as banks start building the trust and seeing the data, they get onto the platform. Now, first at a big risk premium still, but over the years, it goes down and goes down. And in Uganda, we've just launched the first mobile money securitization on the continent, which took about 2 or 3 years to do. But with that level of trust, you've now seen cost of funds drop to half, and we're getting close to single-digit cost of funds in that country, which means customers are benefiting from. So I think coming back to this thinking of systems versus building the core, it's really important that we get all of the different components right before we enter into a country and just start a fintech. Like, you can go into a country and try to do digital credit, but you don't have the pipes that Shaibu's got. Like, if I can't disperse and collect, it's going to be very expensive, right? So we both know that if collections are down, there's no way that you're going to get that money back, right? So if you don't have the right data, and most specifically, if you don't have the right capital support, and I think that's something that we can systematically change as we build trust on the continent, is to say, to GB's idea, can you transfer the knowledge and the proof points from one country to the other and say, this is a proven record, a proven model. Can you restart the cost of capital at day 10 instead of day 0?
So, and just to be clear, because I thought your initial point was also super interesting. It's certainly a question of data transformation. I think, Dari, I'm going to follow up with you to ask if you can solve his problem here. But you had mentioned this idea of sort of overseas capital, and obviously wherever you source your capital from, the further away it is, the more the information asymmetry, which can then impact the cost of capital. And if you throw in other kinds of issues, the risk premium for the investor goes up, which means that the performance for the or what is considered an investable company, that barrier becomes a higher barrier. Just before we can get into the data issues, I mean, any thoughts on that in terms of the degree to which the way in which you package the investment can kind of push against that natural barrier of capital coming from other parts of the world?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think if I look back how we started the company, I think the one big mistake we made, and I think it's part of the time, is everyone ran to the West Coast, and that's where you get your money. It's a lot easier to get, but extremely expensive. And I think if we started collaborating and getting involved in the countries we were going to serve, we always knew we were going to be in Ghana, and it was going to be one of our biggest countries. That's where the investment should have come from. That's where the initial conversations would have been done, because you would have had ownership, you would have had the idea being built, we would have had regulatory approval very fast because you've got the buy-in. So I think that's a big mistake that a lot of startups do, because you've got this bright idea and you're a little bit desperate to say, we want to get going, whoever gets you the capital first, and then you end up paying school fees for a long time. I think if we could move forward and to say, what's the next generation of startups, and can they get help from local banks, local entities, I think that will put us a long way further in getting the cost down faster.
Well, Dari, I still did want to obviously follow up on this conversation, because obviously if we're talking about data and data flows and just the position of On-Afrique and where you sit in terms of that informational payments, how do you view the potential there in terms of attacking both cost of credit? When you think about infrastructure players like Jumo, is the need sitting inside of the payment networks possibly? And if so, what would it take to unlock the infrastructure and capital?
Yeah. By the way, I forgot. I mean, I thought it was obvious, but that SWIFT for mobile money exists. It's called On-Afrique. Your question, yeah. A few years ago, there was this Economist article that says data is the new oil. And this was pre-AI. So if data was the new oil back then, you can only imagine what it is now. So, and in the case of credit in general, in particular, it is essential. And mobile money has a lot of it. And in absence of reliable, enduring credit bureau, mobile money data is probably the best alternative signal you can use for underwriting. But it is still a pretty weak signal. And I'm sure Paul will agree with me, right? So, because when you think about it, and again, we are in family, so we can also admit the shortcomings of mobile money. 75% of the accounts sit idle per month, 20 years later. Every dollar that gets cashed in, 74 cents get cashed out. So with all the noise, with all the effort, with all the work we have done, this is still a transit tool more than a home or a financial home. And until we address that, the weak signal that we have can only underwrite relatively small amount, as we're seeing today, call it $20 or so. And if we want to go up, then we have to give more utility so that it becomes really a financial home. So yes, today it is, in many places, that's the best alternative you have. But it has its own shortcomings.
So I guess I'll move now from the credit of the sort of the borrower to the question a little bit more specific. I don't know if you want to build on this conversation, but you also have made some pretty interesting comments about sort of credit default and systems and what should happen with different kinds of players in payments networks. But where do you see data and information, and what do you think is the most transformative sort of impact that has for the everyday consumer?
Thank you very much for that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for that. No, I mean, data obviously is the new currency for fintech and digital finance. And the reason why it's important is not far-fetched, because as you mentioned, I mean, for credit scoring, I mean, this is such a powerful tool which helps you to underwrite a facility. But over and above that, what we are seeing happening globally is a certain shift around data capture. And the next big business is who is able to capture enough data points, what you call your digital footprint of your customer, and be able to serve them better. So there are a lot of interesting use cases that we're using data for, of course, in a very responsible way. For instance, in terms of customer management, how do we serve our customers at the point of need, for instance? So that is a very important angle we use data for. Over and above that is also how do we then also use these data points to also drive certain trust within the ecosystem. I mean, trust is the biggest asset for a fintech, because you want that service to be delivered at the point of the need of the customer, right? So how do you ensure that you use the data points to we're moving from just a rule-based, fraud detection mechanism to more behavioral-based, and how best do you, use the data points you have to kind of predict a certain fraud behavior and be able to actually prevent it. So there's a lot of work we do behind the scene in actually stopping, fraud from manifesting, as an example. So there are a lot of, real use case, which is not directly going to hit the bottom line, but actually deliver value to the customer from an experience point of view. And I think, as Daryl mentioned, mobile money presents a big opportunity to really tap into all these value pools in terms of data and harvest it in a way that we can serve our customers, with a lot of the systems that we are talking about building, which should be also open, we should now be able to tap into, Bank of Ghana has come up with a lot of reforms around open banking, and there are other interesting stuff that are coming up. This will present opportunity. I mean, I recall somebody was telling me that, but why are you so open about open banking? What are you thinking? And I told the person that, we come from a position of openness because we want to build a platform. And again, if you want to build, just back to the analogy we started, if you want to build that big pipe, you have to be very open to accommodate and accept there may be some, commercially not too interesting things that may happen to you, but you also have to think positively in terms of how will this impact the general ecosystem. And that's the way we are wired, and that's the way we look at opportunities within this environment.
Is by any chance generative AI or that kind of sort of leapfrogging in AI, is that also impacting or helping your business at all, or is that something you spend not much thinking about or worried about or eager about fraud detect, or is that not really?
You're talking about AI?
Yes, AI.
No, look, AI is here to stay, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to evolve. Our group president yesterday talked about some of the use cases, right, around how we're using it and how we will learn with AI, and how do you best use it. I think that the best use case for AI is yet to come, and just as generative AI works, we also have to adapt to what new insights we're able to glean on and use it in a way that serves the customer. Of course, we're also conscious of the not so great part of AI and how do we use it, especially when it comes to fraud. Deep fake is one thing that we are seeing coming up. How do you also build on that to also counteract some of these deep fake elements?
Great. So, you did bring up government and regulation. I think one of the really interesting trends that I see around the world, and certainly you see it in different countries here in Africa and in the region, is governments sort of getting into the infrastructure business in different ways, right? I mean, you have CBDC pilots in some countries, even in Europe and South America. You have instant payments where different central banks are much more invested in terms of the underlying infrastructure. For a company like Flutterwave, what does that mean? I mean, do you see opportunity there? Does it create new complexities for you? Like, does it open the door to new kinds of plugins? Because you do see maybe faster learning when government gets involved to see just how hard it is to build some of these systems. I mean, what do you think is the appropriate, or what do you think the trend line is, I should say, when you think about what you're doing and sort of the government's role in the infrastructure business?
Thank you so much, Chris. So for me, right, I've thought of what we've seen so far in that sphere has been how transformative that you can actually use new technologies to drive regulation as well, right? And one of the big bets we have at Flutterwave right now is stablecoin, which is very big for us. And we're doing it from a regulated perspective, right? We believe that stablecoin has very huge utility, right? And this came from customer demand for us. We have a lot of SMB clients who is paying a supplier in Singapore. And I said, look, if you order from me on a Friday and do a wire transfer, we'll deliver to you in 5 days. But if you send us a USD, whatever, a stable coin, we are going to give you the goods instantly. So they're like, hey, can you support this for us? Our suppliers are now giving on their invoices my wallet address. There's a new addition subtly coming through right now. So we had no choice but to get our regulator and say, hey, this is happening. To actually make this trade work faster for African SMBs, African corporate B2B trades, stablecoin is becoming a form factor that needs to be looked at very carefully. And what is surprising, they were all receptive to this. Especially when you show them how you're protecting the consumer, the end user, the businesses involved, how the risks are being highlighted and also being mitigated, they are very open to that. For example, recently in Nigeria, there was an AML, saw arrangement where some fintech were appointed to look at stablecoin and how to work. We're part of that group, right? We're also currently part of the Ghana Sandbox as well, with a partner also on stablecoin and cryptocurrency. So the point is, there's an opportunity there that we are seeing. So we're launching what I feel is the biggest African-wide stablecoin deployment, where we're supporting, coins like Ripple USD, but with government support, regulator consent, doing it with them to say, look, this is not really changing the way money is moving. This is another payment form factor. It's blockchain, programmable, yes, but it can actually help to move things quicker for the average business or average SMB consumer who needs to pay supplier abroad. They don't have to use Swift and we can use something else. And I think it's getting that acceptance. And what we've seen so far with regulator has been, when you engage them, you actually get support. And you'll be surprised. I think there's a mental mind shift with them right now. They're no more the 70-year-old gray old men who are regulating you. They're actually 35, 40-year-old people who are actually experts in their field, who are now regulating fintechs. So now you can have real conversations about, look, I want to do this thing. How do we solve the problem? How do we make this rule easier? How do we cater for what concerns you as a regulator? And that is getting a lot more accepted than it was before, right? So, and that's what I think is a very big piece. Now we're going live in a couple of days where you start seeing stablecoin on merchant dashboard, right, with full regulatory support across like 4 or 5 countries in Africa. And that is a game changer. And I think that's a way you can actually transform how money moves, without actually also, shortchanging the regulatory framework in place as well.
There was so much in that answer that when I see you in Washington in October, we're going to continue this conversation. I mean, I just as a quick sort of follow on, when we think about where we started with the conversation, when you think about mobile money and then you make a transition, query, form factor or not, it is a different pipe. To be determined, is it a different plumbing? To be determined whether or not we get a system, right? But stablecoins are coming, and if not coming, they're already here. And so the question is, again, how do we sort of leverage that? And then, what are the places of regulators and also even banks? And when you think about what you've been able to do with Jumo, you've worked not against the banks, but you've worked with the banks hand in hand. Banks are traditionally, the most regulated financial institutions in any particular economy. Have you seen through that work with the banks and by extension with the regulator sort of best practices? Like, what looks best when you think about the question of governments in that sort of infrastructure building business?
Yeah, I agree with what GB was saying about the openness, but I think what we're witnessing here this week is exactly that answer. Like, this is incredible. A Bank of Ghana sponsored event where we're sitting and talking about fintech and collaboration. And yesterday, the governor opened up about saying, we want to help and support. It's critical. Like, we've realized that there's no way that if you do not engage and build together that you can make it. And I think in the kind of last decade when fintech starting up, that's the mistake we all made. We were trying to disrupt, we were trying to go around, we were trying to be fast. But the real way to do this is to engage early, because we've got incredible regulators in a lot of the countries that want to engage and they understand what the problems are. And I think what's great about that is then we build together, because there's gaps in between what we want to build that only a central bank or the government can fix. And if we front run those issues, I think the sustainability is a lot better.
That's right. Mr. Moderator, we have 1 minute to go.
Someone's going to very politely escort all of us off the stage in about in apparently 55 seconds. So I don't think that there's really enough time other than to thank all of you for just a wonderful conversation. As I said, I have a big conference in DC that I do every October, and I've always done it with GFTN and our friends over at the Bank of Ghana. You're all very welcome to continue it in the fall. And thank you so much for everyone for listening to us.
Thank you.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, help me say a big thank you. Help me say a big thank you to Professor Chris. Prof, let's have you for a group photo. Many thanks to you, Professor Chris Brahma, Chief Executive Officer, FinTech Foundation, together with your colleagues. Shaibu Haruna is the CEO of MTN Mobile Money FinTech Limited. Dare Okujo is the founder and chief executive officer of Honor Free, Olubenga Agbola, founder and chief executive officer of Flutterwave, and Paul Welpton, group chief executive officer of Jumo. Please, another round of applause. What they have done in 40 minutes is to open our eyes from platforms to systems, how we can build foundations, scale Africa's digital finance economy. And ladies and gentlemen, one thing that is central, that was central in their conversation, was the use of data. Who owns it, particularly, and how to build it. It leads us to another conversation, ladies and gentlemen, on building, let me take that again, please. On building functional capital markets, global investments, liquidity, and Africa's path to scale. Here to walk us through this wonderful conversation, ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome my panelists. Darren Johnson, the Global Chief Operating Officer, Impacts Management Company. A round of applause. Darren likes to hear the applause when he's walking, you see. He's a big man. Darren is joined by the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Whitaker Group. Make welcome Madame Rosa Whitaker. We make welcome the Managing Counsel for Coranco at Law, Judith O. Coranting. Joining this amazing panel is the head of listing and new products, Ghana Stock Exchange, Joyce A.C. Boache. And moderating, we're joined by the co-founder and director, Universal Pensions Pte. Limited, Parul Seth Khanna. Now this is a balanced panel. Take it away, Madam Moderator, you have 40 minutes.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking the time. It's still an unbalanced one, just more software. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with this stellar panel to my left. Just to put it in the context, sorry, I'm just going to read out a few things so that we know that we have the right context for this conversation. Let me begin with a simple observation. Africa is not short of capital, and it is certainly not short of opportunity. Yet, despite being home to some of the world's fast-growing economies, youngest population, largest infrastructure gaps, and the most strategic energy and mineral assets, African capital markets still account for a very small share of the global portfolio allocation. But why? Because global capital does not move on optimism alone. It moves on liquidity, confidence, predictability, market depth, and the ability to enter and exit the markets efficiently. And this is the real challenge before us. The next chapter of Africa's growth story will not be written simply by attracting more investment. The next chapter of Africa's growth story is really going to be not driven by investment. It is going to be written by building markets that are financially enough, trusted enough, and scalable enough to absorb long-term capital consistently. This means asking difficult questions. Are our exchanges deep enough? Are our regulatory framework enabling growth or slowing it down? Can local institutional capital become a stronger anchor for our markets? And critically, how do African markets move from being viewed as opportunistic trades to strategic long-term allocations? But ultimately, strong capital markets do more than raise money. They price risk, recycle domestic savings, fund enterprise, create resilience, and determine whether economic growth becomes broad-based and sustainable. So today's conversation is really about foundations. The infrastructure, the regulation, the liquidity, the trust required to build capital markets capable of supporting Africa's next phase of scale. Joining me today is Joyce. She's the head of listing new products at the Ghana Stock Exchange, helping shape listings, innovation, and market participation in Ghana's capital markets. We have Rosa, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Whisker Group and one of the foremost voices shaping US-Africa trade and investment engagements. Darren, Global Chief Operating Officer at Impacts Asset Investment, bringing the institutional investor perspective from global sustainable asset management. And Judith, Managing Counsel at Coranco at Law, with deep expertise on the legal and regulatory framework underpinning capital markets growth. Thank you all for joining us. Joyce, I'm going to start with you, obviously. How can the frontier exchanges like Ghana better position themselves to attract sustained foreign institutional investment while managing volatility and the current risk that exists?
Thank you very much for that question, and thank you for the opportunity to be here to discuss this very important topic. For investors, we know that investors prioritize transparency, they prioritize liquidity, they prioritize regulatory certainty, because they need to make that informed decision. And as such, transparency is very important. How the issuers or how investors interact with the issuers on our market is very important. Giving them the opportunity to have every information that is necessary for them to make that informed decision is very important to the market. So if it's a market that siphons investors, do not give investors the right information, then it is a real challenge. I mean, when it also comes to liquidity, yes, the investor wants to come in and go out at whatever time they prefer, whatever time they want. So if you have a market that there's a liquidity issue, then that is also a big problem to the investor. Now, when it comes to regulatory certainty, they want to see that there's regulators making sure that the standards are set, and issuers and investors are really, making sure that they take whatever is required of them very serious, so that confidence in the market will be established. So when it comes to Africa as a whole, we need to be able to always position ourselves in a way that there's continuous standards of disclosure that aligns with international best practice. And in so doing, we would then have that investors coming in to take opportunity of our market. So for us as Ghana Stock Exchange, what have we done? To be able to spread across to make sure that every investor is catered for, we have segments of market. We have 6 segments of market. We have our equity market that has our main market and our alternative market. Our main market also houses ordinary shares, preference shares, ETIs, depository receipts, and this is the market that we started with. So on this market, we have our blue chip companies like the MTNs, the Stancharts, the Unilevers, and all the big companies that you can think of, and also the smaller size ones that came in at that time. Now, why the need for an alternative market? Because we realized that there's a gap that we needed to fill, the gap of taking care of the SMEs. So the indigenous SME companies could also take advantage of the market and raise long-term patient capital. So that market, equity market, is also available. Now, we have our debt market. So if you are not comfortable with the equity to start with, then you go to the debt market. So for the debt market, we have the market that takes care of the government bonds. We have the market that same market takes care of corporate bonds. And then we have the gender bonds, we have social bonds, we have the green bonds market, and we have what we launched recently being a commercial paper market. So because we realize that it's not always the long term, but we have to be able to fill the space of the short term as well. So it's between 15 days to 270 days. You come in, you raise the capital for your capital, working capital, and all of that. So we have that broad segment of market so that nobody is missed out. As an exchange, we make sure that we are positioning ourselves at that place where, when it comes to raising of capital, the exchange is the first place you think of, and it is the preferred platform also for investment. So in a nutshell, this is what we are doing in that space, and making sure that we are attracting foreign inflows, because when you are positioned in such that foreign investors want to look at your market, it's a plus for you, because you are setting that standard, and you are aligning the practice of the market, the rules of the market to international best practice. That is what we always look at and make sure that we are up there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Joyce. I think you've made very important points on learning from global practices, making capital markets inclusive, so there has to be trust. But there also need to be some private players that come into the market to make access much easier. I will come to that on that, but I'm just going to bring you in, Darren, right here. So from the operational seat of global asset manager investing in transition economy, what would move Africa from a footnote to a deliberate allocation in institutional portfolios? So we just you don't want to be the fine print, right?
Well, thank you. That's a very good question. I feel like I've spent my life...
Sorry, Rosa, that was for Darren. Forgive me.
It's okay, you saved me. Yeah. No, thank you for that, and thank you for allowing me to be here. So I think there are maybe 3 structural reasons. Of course, there are more, but for impacts, we don't have a deliberate allocation to Africa today. It's not a philosophical issue, it's more of a structural issue. And it's similar to any other emerging markets. There's nothing necessarily special about Africa in that term to kind of attract institutional allocation. So I guess it's for us scale and cadence. So if we're talking about fixed income, issuer sizes are typically below benchmark, and benchmark inclusion is very important. Obviously, the bid and offer spread tends to be quite wide. In stress scenarios, it's quite difficult to unwind. And for us, if we were to kind of invest here, any kind of investment will be like an active bet that we can't really hedge. Credit machinery as well. In terms of from our experience, when if there's any default, I think that default resolution is uneven in Africa, and I think that's a bit of a challenge as well. And research cost tends to be relatively high in terms of the kind of relative position size that we could take here. And then we have currency, and currency is a big topic, which I think Joyce and I and Judith were discussing earlier. But credit funds take currency risk, as a category, right? So we don't take it as a category. We want to hedge away currency risk, right? That's what we want to do. So local markets that offer NDF depth, so non-deliverable forward depth, can't make our hedge exposure work. So we can't hedge away our exposure. So what unlocks it? There's no single ingredient. Let's say it's a regular kind of benchmark issuance. I think not sporadic one-offs in terms of what sometimes we see. A clean restructuring precedent, country to country in Africa. I think that's really important. Standardized disclosure aligned to the ISSB. We need some standardization. predictable FX markets as well, and domestic. I think that's your hat really, but domestic and pension and insurance growth to kind of anchor the demand that makes everything else possible. So I personally think, and hopefully we go into this, but sustainability mandated capital is more naturally aligned to Africa. Because if you think about, transition finance, adaptation that we need as well, and infrastructure, investment in infrastructure, it kind of makes sense for this capital to be here. So we really, in my view, need to do more to make sure we capture that.
I'm going to come to you, Rosa, in just a second, but I'm just going to do a follow-on with you again, Darren. So how much of it is a challenge that is regulatory and how much is infrastructure and frictional operations and things like that? Because those are also the things that keep uptake away. So what is your experience? Darren?
So just say the question again at the end of it, sorry.
I said the challenges around how much is regulatory sort of framework or challenge, or are there operational frictional challenge? The uptake keeps it away, right?
Yeah, so in terms of regulatory, I think the regulation is quite good. From what I understand the regulation, I think it is really operational. So I think it's a 70-30 kind of split. So I'll give you an example. In April this year, we received a bulletin about repatriating FX in Ghana. There was a problem. The central bank were prioritizing, I think, their sovereign payments, and they were deprioritizing capital from, investment managers, asset managers. Now, for us, the issue with that is if you're running a kind of investment fund, a collective investment scheme, and you receive a redemption and you process that redemption pro rata, if Ghana is an allocation and you need to raise money in a particular time frame, this now becomes a problem. And so what happens? Well, if we experience that too many times, the cost goes up for us because we now have to borrow to cover that situation. And we lose faith and confidence to invest in this market, and therefore we won't invest anymore. So it's really, I think, the operational friction that is what causes firms like us, unless we're sophisticated in Africa, we don't mind standing that risk. But if we're Western with no African lens and we want to come here to take advantage of the opportunity here, that friction is too much for us to bear.
Thank you very much. I think fintechs in the room take a note. Joyce to my left is looking for private players to take it to the market. So, Rosa, I'm going to come right to you on this. Sorry, I think there's a problem with the talk back, so I don't think I'm that audible. You spent decades shaping US and Africa investment engagements. As global capital becomes more strategic and transactional, what is the new playbook? What does it look like? What is it that the US institutional capital into African markets?
Thank you so much. Well, let me just say that there is a new era of unprecedented transactionalism in US engagement with Africa. And I think that we will find, and we are finding, that US capital is no longer moved as much by need, by narratives, by individual stories of success, and not even by great storytelling. It is really moved by structure, evidence, and familiarity. And that really gets to the heart of the issue. Underpinning transactionalism is data. And Africa is perceived wrongly, in my view, in the US as a data desert. It's just a data desert. And so it's really not a data desert, but there is a data translation problem. And I think that is what, if we were able to really solve that, and we can look at an example from the African fintechs, which attracted billions of dollars in US capital. And that's why I'm so impressed with the CEO of Flutterwave. I think he was here, and Paystack and M-Pesa. But they were able to take thin file markets, behavioral insights, put that in a structured way, in a way that Western investors could understand it. They were excellent translators because it's very difficult, especially getting through the investment committees of US pension funds. And I also just want to add that we are talking about a $50 to $70 trillion institutional capital market that's very liquid and very deep. And a lot of African investors and others seeking the capital get very frustrated. They get frustrated with the knowledge gap because they encounter sometimes this ignorance about Africa, and then you overlay that with arrogance. But let me just say there is a path, and I do believe that it has to do with translation and also advocacy. If I can take just a few seconds to talk, advocacy is very important. Africa is the only market in the United States, the world's largest institutional capital market, that is not represented by a strong private sector entity. So who does the translating? So if I'm an investor and I want to learn about African opportunities, where do I go? I have to go to embassies, 55 embassies, so I'm talking to diplomats and government officials. They're not speaking my language. And so I think we have to correct this. And also there are other opportunities that could unlock capital if the advocacy was there. You have a large diaspora. Collectively, they have $1.6 trillion in consumer spending. When I think about the fact you have the United Nations in America with a $91 billion pension fund, you have Africans that represents the largest majority of members, and you hardly have none of that pension money invested in Africa. That is not even, okay, we can say it's data structuring, but that is an advocacy issue. And so I'm calling for more advocacy and more advocacy around policies that make sense. You know, I was one of the leaders and architects of AGOA. People said we could never get AGOA extended under Trump. We just did. And we did it with God first, God be the glory. And we did it with advocacy. So we have two policies that I can tell you, if we can get this done in the US, you will have capital coming in. And that is, the US needs to offer tax incentives for US investors that want to invest in Africa. We know that when we open up the tax code, US money moves. So what does that look like? It looks like means you can repatriate your profits in key sectors, repatriate the profits back to the US, tax-free or to reduce tax because we're under worldwide taxation, or you get a development tax credit. We have come so close to getting this done. We tried it to help in apartheid in South Africa. When we opened up the tax code, we said US companies that want to stay in apartheid South Africa, you will be subject to double taxation. Despite their narratives, they left. So these are the things I think would help.
Thank you, Rosa. I'm going to bring you in, Judith, really quickly to follow on what Rosa was saying. So all of this also requires a very strong regulatory framework, right? But at sometimes regulations can be restrictive and sometimes they can boost capital growth. What does it look like for Ghana and more the continent more generally?
So looking at regulations in Ghana, we have a strong regulatory framework, actually. We've got the Securities Industry Act, the relevant regulations, and you've also got the SEC. And then you've got the Ghana Stock Exchange, not a regulator, but a listing and such. You've got a framework and you've got everyone who all the regulators coming in to create a system already. I think the issue, just like you started with, is that regulation needs to not just stifle, but also allow innovation. We're coming into a world where innovation is moving at a very fast pace. The way capital is raised and deployed is changing across the not just in Ghana, but across the world, across Africa. So regulation needs to actually join that and understand and, one, be predictable, have your rules, how it's done, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, but also understand that there's a need to allow for changes. There's also a need to come in, know what's in the market, what's changing, what the innovators, what the developers and such are doing, so your regulations can change. Rosa, I think, touched on private sector as well. With equities and such, now you've got companies such as, I think, Second Stacks and such, which are making it possible to make equities available, securities available in different ways, and to actually make it available worldwide. Regulation needs to allow that, so that people don't just want to go to a brick and mortar anymore. They don't want to have stringent rules. So regulations need to not just be stringent, like I said, but also allow for changes. You've also got you look at place like the pensions industry, which is now I would say a domestic, maybe you can call them a mammoth. The pensions industry is, there's a lot of capital there, the assets under management, there's a lot of capital there, but they don't even have anywhere to put their money due to how they are regulated, due to the laws about where they can invest their funds. So regulation actually needs to open up, the laws need to open up and allow them not just to invest primarily in government assets, but also open it up to other assets that could create greater returns as well.
I think you bring up a very important point, because while regulation for the capital markets is very important, but also regulatory issues for insurance markets and pension markets and other short-term savings, mutual funds and so on also become equally important, because those capitals are then invested in markets, so I want to just move to more solutions oriented, right? So we've just kind of opened up choice. What role do pensions, excuse me, insurance firms and domestic managers have to play, exactly to what I was saying? How can they change the framework?
Right. So this constituency of investors, the buy side, as we call them, they are very important to our market, because they have the deep pocket, and so they can do the big deals. And so for us as an exchange, we have involved ourselves even at the regulatory level, where we have been involved in the review of the guidelines as to what they can invest in, what percentage, and all of that. And we have stayed very close to this constituency, in the ecosystem, because without them, either too, the market was a bit, siphoned, but what we want to see is more participation in the market. Yes, we do not have a lot of alternatives for them. That is what they are yearning for at the moment, because they have more cash to deploy, but where are the assets to be able to put those capital in? So that is what we are so working on, to make sure that we have a pipeline. If you follow the space in these few days, you realize that there has been IPOs going on, there has been a lot of capital raising here and there going on. So as an exchange, we are positioning ourselves in such a way that these monies will come to the market, because they have a percentage that they have to invest in the market. So we are looking at what strategy, what innovative ways can we create for this funds to come into the market. And therefore, we are coming up with what we call the GSE Academy, where we're going to nurture companies, to be able to take advantage of the capital available, so that we will have a pipeline. Every time we have a pipeline, we have companies that are raising money and affording this buy side to be able to have that needed assets to be able to put their monies in. So we are making conscious effort. We are being intentional about creating these assets and therefore staying close with them. We engage them a lot, to find out what their needs are, how we can work together to be able to give them what they need. Yes, the domestic debt exchange came in and shook the system a bit, but you see, we took advantage of it as something that we even though it hurt our market, we have to see the positivity from that angle, because either they were pumping the monies all to the government paper side, but not in the real economy. And that is not what the best of it, So this academy is going to make sure that we are nurturing companies, putting them, having a pipeline, so that they will be able to put their monies. And believe you me, this year we're going to have more listings coming. We are really working, being intentional about that and working towards growing that space so that our pension funds will be able to invest their money in the real economy for growth of our economy, to take care of all the nuances in our economy where we have unemployment and all of those things. So this money is coming in, bring about growth. Growth means you are employing, you are paying more tax, you are making sure that everybody is in that space, and we are growing our economy by ourselves with the domestic capital that we have available. So it is a constituent that we don't play with at all in that ecosystem.
You make a very, very, very strong point on making it, looking inward and sort of making it work with the population of your own country. Darren, I'm going to segue to you a little bit. There is a thought process that says the informal sector needs more muted and probably needs to put more money into debt instruments. And then there's another thought process that says the low-income individual needs aggressive equities because they need to get better returns. But given that the African listed entities, how is it going to include the non-included? Because unless your middle class really puts in the money into the markets, the rich will still get richer and the poor will still get poorer.
So I can only speak from an outside perspective. What I would say for us, again, just to reiterate some points, I think one of the things that I see, which is interesting with Europe, something that took Europe 30 years to do, which was to standardize. MiFID, it took 30 years to do that. And if you look at Africa, Ghana, we have an opportunity here because the technology that exists today allows us to fast forward and bring in that standardization. But what I would say is, like, for example, KYC and operational due diligence. Those types of things take a lot of time for us when we're looking across Africa because there is no standardization. So I think we need a standardized pack to be able to deploy capital appropriately in Africa generally. The next point I would say is settlement cycles. So going back to this MiFID point. So settlement cycles in the US, we've moved to T+1. In the UK and Europe, they're looking to move to T+1 in October next year. And one of the things that Africa is facing is we're chasing those limits there. We're chasing it at the moment, but Africa's also got to harmonize its settlement cycles. I think that is super important. And I guess the other thing I would say is, and I don't know how to fix this other than saying that I think without sounding political, so forgive me, but I think that the government today, now in Ghana, for me, is doing an excellent job. When you look at the numbers, inflation has come down. You're seeing that capital reserves are increasing, the exchange rate, they have a target and they're kind of keeping it there. And what's interesting to me is when the government were in before, the same president before, again, forgive me, it was a mess. And what I like is that they've learned from that, and it starts with the macro. So let's get the macro right, and then we can start deploying capital in the right way, get the trust in the macro, and start deploying the capital. Because as you were saying, Rosa, there's a lot of money to come here, but where can we put it? Because where it will normally go is infrastructure and private markets, because there's a lot more capacity there. But if we talk about the stock exchange, which is very, very important, there's only a few companies today that can really receive that capital. So there is so much more to do, but the opportunity is immense. And that's what, why I'm sitting here and talking about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Darren. Judith, how do regulators really strike a balance between keep regulating the way they do, restricting, yet, being able to get innovation and capital markets going? So it's like if not regulated well, it could go south. So how can regulation really take care of that?
Well, I think I'd say you have to, regulating would have to be less reactive and more risk-based. So in essence, you look at the system and what's happening, the issue before you, do a risk assessment and regulate accordingly. And not by regulating by slamming your hand down on it, but seeing more of, okay, this is what is happening. How do we allow it and do it in a safe environment? Because capital markets, capital goes where there's confidence, right? People's regulations have to make sure that there's confidence in the market. So the regulations should be more risk-based. So like I said, you see how it's going, and then you create laws that allow it, but allow it, quote unquote, safely. And you also make sure that the sanctions for going outside of the parameters of the law are predictable. People want to know that if I do X and something happens or I get caught, what is going to be the penalty for it? There needs to be good communication on that, and people need to understand that. And the regulations also have to be, like I mentioned before, innovation is happening, tech is happening. The regulations have to embrace that. The laws have to embrace that. And I would say Ghana is doing a fantastic job of that. We know in December, the virtual assets law was passed. And Ghana is one of the first countries in Africa to actually take a viewpoint to say, look, we're going to allow this. We're not just going to build it into an existing framework, because it actually does not fit into any existing framework. But there needs to be laws surrounding it. So that was a great step towards understanding that it's happening. It's not new. It's been happening for years. And so we've seen the risks of it, and we realize that we have to create a law that allows it to happen in a safe environment. You have things like sandboxes. The regulators can use sandboxes, which Ghana is doing a fantastic job of now. You've got the regulatory BOG doing that, and SEC also doing that. So you can study how the markets move, how institutional investors are actually running certain businesses, and how the securities will move, and then you can create the laws accordingly.
Thank you. I think this topic needs much more time. I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, this is not enough. Rosa, I wanted to give you this last word. So you spoke about, you're leveraging US pension and bond markets for Africa. What is it going to take for them to really write the check? And is there room for portfolio diversification within the continent?
Yes, I think there's definitely room for portfolio diversification. But let me just tell you, I really am a champion, and I want to thank the governor and the Bank of Ghana for being so visionary. And what the bank is talking about in terms of tokenization, fractional ownership, and digitization of gold and even other commodities. I think that is the way that you address deepening the capital market and also making it more exclusive. because when we look at liquidity and inclusion, and we have this massive, what they call gray economy, the informal sector, it's really an invisible economy. And how do you bring them in? You know, you've got a large share of people, they're nano-traders, gig workers, but I do believe, just imagine, if you have the trader on the street and for the equivalent of 350 Naira, that's about $25, she could have fractional ownership in gold. We democratize that. And then that would also, you bring them into the capital market. But I can tell you, US investors would be very interested in that as well. So you can expand the base dramatically, you can deepen liquidity organically, and it would be so incredibly transformative. And I would just end by saying Africa's next frontier is not just attracting capital, it's expanding what counts as capital, who can access it, and how it is structured. And what I'm talking about, US institutional and global institutional investors, they understand this structured digitization, which is transparent, and I believe you could achieve so many objectives with it.
I completely agree. I think that's what I was talking about with the technology, the opportunity for Ghana to lead the way in Africa. And I completely agree. Tokenization, democratizing that, getting more people involved in the capital markets kind of tries to solve some of this liquidity problem.
Thank you so much for that. We're almost out of time, but I think this panel has been stellar in putting the perspective on capital markets look like in the continent of Africa, what is required. We need to look inward. We need to have a regulatory framework that is predictable. We need to get foreign investors to look at Africa and perhaps portfolio diversification and get the right kind of robust products to be able to get this market going. I just have one example to give. I think one thing that is required for people to use capital markets is if they're not used, whatever we are saying today is not going to mean anything. People need to come on to it. So I'll just give you India's example. To create public good and get people curious about mutual funds, they got the best cricketers in India to just do adverts and say mutual funds is the right choice. And that's it. And then every gig worker, every guy was listening to, Sachin Tendulkar, I don't know how many of you know him, or the best cricketers, because if he was saying it, they were curious about it. And then the ecosystem came together, of course, with better capital investments, better regulations, and getting more people onto the bandwagon of capital markets. So I really hope that that could be something. And of course, it's a time of instant gratification. I touched upon in my opening speech saying you need to be easy to get in and easy to exit. So as long as we can make that, we will build the trust. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Madam Parul Seth Kana, co-founder and director, Universal Pensions Pte Limited, for moderating this panel very expertly. Help me say thank you to Joyce Esibuache, Judith Okuranting, Rosa Whitaker, and Darren Johnson. Please, they are yours for the applause. How about a group photo? And thereafter, we appreciate our sponsors.
Fresh drops, simple, refreshing, reliable, more than dietitian, they refresh the way today. Fresh fruits, stay fresh, stay deep. Looking to earn more by alcoholism and higher levels of fuel in Ghana? Fuel with JB. With JB, you can rest assured that you're getting the most out of the vehicle while enjoying benefits and superior fuel quality. Cheap today. JB. Earn more, earn less.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's day 2 of the 3i Africa Summit brought to you by the Bank of Ghana, together with the Ghana Interbank Payments and Settlements Systems Limited and Global Finance and Tech Network of Singapore. We're also supported by a host of sponsors I'd like to acknowledge now. Mobile Money Fintech Limited, Momo, MML, our platinum sponsor, together with Gibbs, our partner and platinum sponsor, with PwC being our gold sponsor. We're ably supported also by Jumo, our gold sponsor, MTN, silver sponsor, Fidelity Bank, silver, Stella Development Foundation, our silver sponsor, Yellow Card, silver, Power Pay, our silver sponsor, Mpuntu, silver, Keynote, bronze, WeWire, bronze, OA Markets, bronze, FinCra, bronze, Paystack is a bronze sponsor, Visa Innovation Partner, the Whitaker Foundation, or the Whitaker Group, I beg your pardon, for innovation. Better Than Cash Alliance is an innovation partner. Insano is also an innovation partner. Access Bank is an innovation partner. Stanbic Bank, innovation. Tech, Telecel Cash is an innovation partner. Optasia, innovation partner. Palms by Eagles. Fido, also an innovation partner. JP Oil, Belacqua, Fresh Drops, Mansu Technologies, innovation partner. Busha, our innovation partner. Blockchain.com, innovation partner. Express Pay for innovation. iSmart, our innovation partner. And UMB. Together, let's celebrate them with a thunderous round of applause. And so just gone by was that very amazing panel presentation on building functional capacity or capital markets, global investment liquidity, and Africa's path to scale. We now want to delve into another conversation which will explore how Africa can build an intelligence economy, that which is powered by data and automation. It is dubbed AI, Open Finance, and Value Creation, Building Africa's Intelligence Economy. Make welcome our panelists, Deborah Asma, Chief Marketing and Operations Officer, Mpuntu Technologies Limited. She's joined by the Chief Executive Officer of the GFT and Solutions, Madam Maha El Damaki. One day. We make welcome the President, African Business Angel Network, ABAN, and Hakabela Limited, Yemi Kerry. And moderating this panel, US Africa Special Correspondent Connecting African News, DevEx, Eden Harris. I believe yours is 30 minutes. Over to you, Madam Moderator.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good? Are you guys awake? Yes, you have energy. Great. Well, as he mentioned, my name is Eden Harris. I am the Chief Special Correspondent for Connecting African News, and I am DevEx's new Ghana reporter. I'm really excited to be here today because we're at a point where AI and open finance are really starting to blur into each other. And that's opening up big possibilities for Africa's financial system, but also raising some real questions about trust, data, among other things. So today I want to unpack both sides, what's working and what's not working, and what still needs to be figured out to build this so-called intelligence economy. To help me with this conversation, again, I am joined by my lovely esteemed panelists. And Deborah, I want to start with you, if that's all right. You sit at the intersection of marketing and operations. What kind of campaigns can companies or even the Bank of Ghana put together or put to build trust in the open finance world? And especially like in markets where data literacy is still like coming together.
Okay, so let's first establish the foundation around what open finance is. It's, restructuring the consumer's data around their financial information and how it's being used. From the campaign point, we need to realize that campaigns must always be contextual. So you need to recognize the unique challenges that exist in the community for you to run a very good campaign. I would probably mention 6 campaigns that I think it's very important around the open finance conversation in order to build trust. And you're building trust in an ecosystem where you have the people with real scars. You have people who have reported fraud, charges they can't explain, their data being mismanaged or misused. These complaints do exist. So I think that for us to build trust, the first thing is that the Bank of Ghana must first establish a national campaign, kind of like what India did with their regulators.
So India did?
India, yeah. Because India is doing real well with regards to open banking and open finance. In order for them to have trust, what they did was to launch a national campaign where you had all the national stations, all the major players in terms of the radio, the TV, the print, and even the community, using the language of the people as well as English, explain why the integration of the data was necessary, why data needed to be shared among third-party providers, and in language that the people could understand. And it was not being done differently or at different times. It was being done nationally at the same time at every channel or every platform. That's something we can adopt as in Ghana ourselves. So we have our various radio stations, our TV stations, our print, our social media platforms. You want to see the regulator go in there and launch that campaign in a language and in plain text, really, that the people can understand and can adopt. When the last panel was leaving the stage, I heard the lady say that they use cricketers even for the capital market campaigns. You want these campaigns to be done by community people as well, not just people in suits who can speak the terms and description of what we are doing, but people that the community can respond and relate to. And on those channels. Then you also want to have the players in the industry do their own campaign. So the campaign can be looked at from, say, in-app consent and notice within the application itself, not buried in terms and conditions, which most of us wouldn't read. If you want the people to trust that what you're doing is legitimate, it's right, and it's for their interest, the language must be something that they can understand, and it must be clear, it must be simple, it should be in basic text. So if I'm consenting to something, this is what I'm consenting to and why. Such a campaign is not one that should be adopted by the regulator. It must be adopted by the players themselves. Because then when I'm using your application, I'm using your system, I am clear and I know why and what I'm consenting to and what I get out of it. And contextually, you should probably also consider a campaign adopting the agencies. So agency banking has done really well in Ghana. It's increased the financial inclusivity that existed before it came. So we need to be able to include the agents in the various communities, and that includes even the churches. It includes the susu collector in the market. It includes all these various, communities or groups that the people have accepted and have adopted, whose words mean something something to them. So when these people also speak about what is being done, why it's being done, and why it's beneficial to them, you get the community buy-in much quicker than it just coming from the top. And so that's also very, very important. And I think that finally, what I would say is, access, the digital access is not the same as trust. And so it's important that we don't think just because people have access to the technology or they have access to, what we're doing, it means that they trust what we're doing. So once the regulator steps in, once the community identified personalities step in, once the players themselves steps in with transparency, then you build an ecosystem where the people understand, can relate, and they can identify people in their own community that have benefited from it. So referral. It's also important, showcasing real life experience and use cases of people within the community that in sharing their financial information probably got better insurance service, got better loan and portfolio management and other things that benefited them that they can relate to.
Yeah, and Maha, I want to bring you in on this conversation. I'm really excited that you're here because you've worked on 3 continents. That is experience that is hard to come by. So you understand how the sausage is made in Africa and different areas. So what are some big mistakes that others should like Africa should avoid when it comes to integrating AI into financial services?
Great. Well, thank you for having me, and hello to everybody. I hope you're having a great second day. There's a lot of, everybody's learning about AI as we go. So, the mistakes, I think, whether you want to call them mistakes, I feel like these are the learnings that we get from new technologies actually coming in. The first question is why? And I think we heard in the case of Ghana, there's a real, there's an outcome as to why we want to use these technologies. What are we trying to achieve? And that's a really important question. For example, you might ask, why am I talking about AI? And I'm using an analog sort of book and pen. Does the technology give me what I need? Well, I'm a risk manager, so I'm worried that my notes won't be there if the machine sort of breaks down. And my response is analog. So the why for me didn't quite cut it in terms of using technology on this panel. The point I'm trying to make is that, understanding why you want to integrate AI into your systems is really important. And if we take it from an institutional level, when we come to financial services companies that are thinking about this, understanding why you need to put it in, why you need to use the technology, and therefore understanding then what the models are, what type of AI you're using, and what do the models do is really important. So different models actually have different risks associated with them. We need to understand these things, right? And how do you apply these models while observing laws and regulations and rules that you must observe? For example, if you take certain models that have high predictive abilities, you might not be protecting your data as much. It goes into a black box. You don't know exactly what it does.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these models are non-deterministic. They're more probabilistic in terms of the outcomes that they achieve, whereas critical decisions have to, are deterministic. There's different, outcomes that you need to achieve, and depending on what model you use, you may or may not be able to, to achieve those outcomes with the right confidence. And when it comes to financial services, what I've seen around the world is that, banks, financial institutions, particularly the large financial institutions, they're not tech companies. They haven't been inherently brought up to really use tech, and they have used tech over the years, but this is a different type of technology that's now coming in. And you can't have your coders in the basement kind of coding away, and you don't know what actually all of that does, what it means, what outcomes it may or may not produce. So there has to be an education, and I'm using the word education, it could be upskilling, it could be capacity building, whatever word you want to use, for everybody to understand how to apply critical thinking to what these models do. And that's really important. We talk about AI and we call it artificial intelligence. And intelligence is a relative term, I would say, in this case. Because when you look at AI, from some of the big applications, it does amazing things, right? And the speed at which it does them. But then some of the basic tasks that we do as human beings, they're really rubbish at it. And so, intelligence, not necessarily in the the measures and the scales that we assess human intelligence, but intelligence nevertheless. So understanding what these models can do and critiquing them across the organization, particularly decision makers, you can't leave it to the tech team, and it has to be toned from the top. So the board needs to understand why you're using AI and what outcomes you're achieving, and they need to be responsible and accountable for what those outcomes are. And this is where it's difficult because, it's a new environment that's emerging, and so public-private partnerships are very helpful in this case. Getting the regulators involved on how to, navigate this environment together, experiment together, and everybody learning from the experimentation. I think the previous panel were talking about sandboxes. You call it sandboxes, test beds, experimental environments, whatever you want to call it. But as long as you're experimenting and learning together, when we're talking about novel risks, the word novel is because we don't know what they are. So we need to experiment to uncover them, and that's what needs to happen. And then the final point I would make is on the productivity piece and, jobs and loss of jobs and things like that. And I think, when we enter into kind of using AI in various organizations, and this is a question that also governments are thinking about, what is the productivity gain? Being a little bit more deliberate on how we measure that, I think would be very helpful. We're seeing up until this point, up until the recent past, a lot of companies can't see what the productivity gains are. Now we're starting to see that they are measuring them and they're seeing those productivity gains. So this is really, that could be a really big why as to why, the use of AI across the economy is that productivity gain.
And Yemi, so you invest in companies, so everyone is using AI, but I'm wondering, are they leaning too heavily on that as a growth story?
I think over the couple of years in which I've been an angel investor, I've heard different phrases, an evolution of how startups are building and what they're building for. Time was when we would hear that I am building an app that will revolutionize da-da-da. And then there's the that I'm building an innovative platform that will. And more recently, we started hearing, I'm building an AI-powered da-da-da. So it has evolved. And in that evolution, what has happened is that there are also Me Too's, because they know and understand that investors are looking for the next big technology. And, if you read the last OECD report, it says that in 2025 alone, about 250 billion had VC investments in AI technology. And that shows you how massive this has been. But as we sit as investors, we begin to wonder, where is this really going? Because those of them that are are developing innovative solutions that are AI powered, do they really understand where this AI is going?
Yeah.
So investors are taking a step back to look, what is going on here? They start to ask certain questions. What value is your AI bringing to the table? Right?
And how can they measure that value?
Look, if you're not telling me that I am leveraging on AI, and if I leverage on AI, my credit rating will reduce by XXX, then I'm not looking at your investments, right? More importantly, apart from the value, is investors are now looking at the structural issues that have started to come out and are saying, have we invested too early in the applications, that the underlying infrastructure has not been taken into cognizance? And so those are the kind of things. So if you're not like a Smile ID that is telling me that I will de-risk fraud, in the next, as it is going, real-time fraud, then I'm not looking at your business. So and these are very, very important issues. So investors are now deliberately asking the real questions. How are you using data? What kind of data? How are you aggregating the data? We heard this morning about the different integrations. So Flutterwave has to go to each country, and there's different infrastructure, and then there's also different policies and compliance, and all of those are very capital intensive. So if you come to me and say, I have a platform that I'm looking at scalability, I'll be looking at you as, what is the next thing? How are you going to scale into the next country? Because there must be added capital that you require for you to scale. So those are the things that we are looking at as investors and taking into cognizance and trying to sieve the boys from the men, who are those that are really utilizing and solving for problems, looking at AI, because they didn't know that agentic AI was coming. Right? All of a sudden, everybody's solving those particular problems that you were solving 5 years ago today. And so my money has gone after I've invested in you. So all of those things are what investors are looking at.
Yeah, thank you for that. So this is our final round. And going back to you, Deborah, many fintechs assume more data leads to a better customer persona. Can you share any success stories where it improved the customer experience and how it helped retain them?
So first off, I think that thinking is really a myth. Just having more data doesn't necessarily mean that you get to know your customer better. I think what separates matured AI companies from basic ones is the feedback loop. And you should be able to collect data in a structured manner, right? You should have an intent to use it. With all the consents and needed regulations being taken note of, you should have the intent to use it. You should also have a proper analytical tool to be able to analyze that data. Other than that, it becomes just expensive noise. Practical use cases would be what we are currently doing even at Impuntu with our CRM that we also give to our enterprise customers. So what we've done is to move it from just a data collection tool where you have a lot of customer information sitting there to a proper channel or a central database that is analyzing the customer's engagement. So we start off the engagement from a consent place where, you take it from either the call where you inform the customer that you are going to be measuring its engagement or analyzing its engagement with the staff in order to provide it with a better service. This is usually a consent that most companies have. However, most companies will stop at the data coming in and not analyzing it. So that's the feedback loop I was referring to. So now you have that, the engagement has happened. You also have the customer's actual usage experience on your products and services, which you're also collecting. That's valuable information. Then you have all the lead engagements, points and notes that you made that is in the CRM. Now, what is happening is that with now on the call, you can do proper sentiment analysis that can tell you the mood, the tone, and the framework or the mindset the customer was at the engagement level. So presently, even on my phone on a daily basis, I have, and WhatsApp is a channel we use a lot. We have a summary of total number of calls that have come in, the sentiment average of those engagements that have been done, and recommendations. So you can have instances where when you're testing a new employee, the AI will tell you that there was a knowledge gap in the product information that was received. So probably consider doing training around this, around X and around Y. Or the customers were really frustrated when the call happened. So you should look at probably reducing the wait time on calling, etc. That data is relevant because of the intent to use and how it informs product development as well as informs engagement and training even within the organization. So you can have a lot of data, you can take in a lot of information, but if you are not taking the information into proper tools, and that's, I believe, what you're saying about the foundational structure of the application itself that exists that you want to scale up with AI. If that application itself has not been built robustly enough, you're going to do any analysis on it. So that's very important. Then first, you must know the why you're collecting the information. So I'm collecting this information because I wanted to inform my product development for my customer. I also wanted to inform the customer experience journey itself, and then in the long run, affect my bottom line. So that's also very, very relevant. So that's what we are presently doing. I think that you spend as much money as you do collecting more information that you don't need, as you would collecting the right information to make the right decision, you know.
Thank you for that, Deborah. And Maha, everyone's pushing for rapid AI adoption, but regulation is still uneven. How can central banks balance innovation with safeguards? I know everyone's asking this question, but do it without stalling business growth.
Yeah, I think, again, a challenge all around the world. AI is moving at a blink and you'll miss it, moving at a rapid pace, and regulators are recognizing that they, it's difficult to keep up. It's interesting, the different approaches that different regulators have taken around the world. Some like Europe, for example, if you recall, they came out with AI regulation. And others decided that actually you can't regulate AI. You have to, if we're regulating, various industries and activities, the outcomes that AI will, AI is not necessarily a thing in and of itself to regulate, right? And so, they took a different approach in terms of what is how do you deploy AI, how do you use it, and what outcomes you achieve. And in the case of the UK, they had this outcomes-based regulation, the consumer duty regulation that came out that looked at outcomes-based and looked at the, ensuring that, whenever you're thinking about AI or otherwise, any other technology, regulators are technology agnostic and they care about the outcome, and it has to be the right outcome for market integrity, for consumer protection, for financial stability, and so on. And so there's been different approaches to AI. Some perhaps rushed into it a little bit too much, but then it continues to change. We've got now agents, AI agents. We've got, we're moving beyond sort of ChatGPT in robotics. That's a different angle as well. And again, what I mentioned in my earlier intervention, the collaboration that needs to happen in this space so everybody can learn together. Regulators talking to each other so they work together. I worked at the BIS before this gig, and central banks wanted to learn from each other. We created platforms where they, because the learning curve, you can't start from scratch. You have to actually build on each other, because that's the only way you can move forward. And try to keep at pace with all of this. So those sorts of, approaches that have now, I think, are picking up pace. I mean, the question of test beds and sandboxes, I talk about them to everybody that I'm talking to these days. Everybody's talking about experiments that go alongside policy reform or policy, analysis and development for how we tackle this new age of technology that's kind of becoming a lot more pervasive and rewiring our lives. And so experimenting alongside how you want to put out legislation and doing this, this collaborative approach to experimentation, I think is needed. I mean, I think I mentioned them, if anybody was here yesterday when I kind of made a few comments on AI. 3 things that regulators can do. One is the gap analysis against what they have today in terms of frameworks, governance frameworks, guidance that they can put out there against international standards, against their peers, against their ambitions. Developing a roadmap for what that would look like in terms of AI governance frameworks is important. Looking at the test beds, the experimentation is the second thing that they can put in place, because again, novel risks, you need to test in a safe environment to uncover these risks. And I should caution, even then, it doesn't, when everything that goes into the real world is different to what goes, what happens in experiments. So, you have to have an appetite for a little bit of risk taking. Otherwise, that's the nature of the game. And then the third, really important, I'm calling it capacity building, calling it upskilling. Get to understand what this technology does. It's going to impact all of our lives, and I think it's important that we get to understand. These three things going hand in hand, regulators can start to think about, can implement them at pace, and try to really be sort of engaged in the conversation. The last point I want to make, because we always talk about regulators not staying ahead of the technology and not keeping up, and regulators must, and I think, I talk to regulators all around the world and they say responsible innovation. Well, what does that actually mean? Right. But there's also an onus on industry to understand the role of regulation and to understand what does it mean to be regulated and what does it mean to contribute to a market that is strong, resilient, there's confidence, where consumers consume and investors invest with confidence. And that is a role not just for regulation, it's a role for everybody. So the capacity building has to be on both sides, in my view. Thank you.
I really like your third point that regulators should understand what they're regulating, because when you do that, you can make effective decisions. Yemi, take us home. So what makes an AI-driven fintech investable in Africa right now? Like, how can those fintechs stand out to angel investors like you?
I mean, for us as angel investors, we invest at a very risky phase in the journey of an entrepreneur, which is where they have ideated something and they have maybe sometimes an MVP, or they are just yet to go to market. Particularly for AI, apart from trying to understand what the team will really understand. I mean, Maya has spoken about talent. One of the major issues that AI companies have now is a talent, the depth of the talent that understand what you're really building and what you're solving for. So hitherto, if I was investing in a healthcare company, I would just look at the team. But I have to understand that there must be continuity after this. And who are those building for you? And what are you building for? That is one. The second thing is, what are you really solving for? To understand that you are not just doing a follow-on of what somebody else has done in India or in Brazil, and you're solving for a real problem on the continent. And what are the real problems? If we look at the African fintech, you showed it on your slides yesterday. They're solving from onboarding issues, the KYC and identity. They're solving for fraud detection right now. And there was a third one, credit ratings. Now, I'm looking at those use cases for AI, and I'm trying to understand what particularly is the AI solving for you, right? And if you're telling me that the product in itself can scale, I want to know how far it can go. We've talked about integration. And so what else is the capital injection that I have to do after the first iteration? Who is going to use all of this, or who is going to make me exit, right? I'm looking at all of that as well. And more importantly, is the product market fit. I had about 2 years ago, I had someone come to pitch about stable coins. And I'm like, hello, I don't understand this. Where are they using it? How are they using it on the continent? But today on this stage, I've heard that Flutterwave is implementing, and I'm saying, I think the time is right. And so I'm going to call the founder and say, hey, what you pitched to me that 2 years ago, what's happening with it? And so those are the kind of things that that we look at, particularly in AI founded businesses.
Thank you so much for that. All right. I think what's really come through clearly is that it's not just about technology or innovation. It's about the people, trust, and data, and how it's been used in real lives. As AI and open finance continue to grow, the big question is not just what we can build, but who it's built for, and whether the system we're creating are actually inclusive and fair. I want to say thank you so much to my esteemed panelists. And I want to urge everyone, do not follow me on Instagram at Eden Harris News. Do not follow me on Instagram at Eden Harris News. Be well.
And many thanks to you. Eden Harris, US Africa correspondent for Connecting Africa News, DevEx, please. A group photo with the panel members, Yemi Kerry, Maha El Dimati, Deborah Asma. We thank you for lending us your great insights. I'd like to acknowledge especially the presence of the Director General of the West African Monetary Institute who joins us. Make welcome Dr. Abdul Salam Sikiru Abidemi. Thank you very much for joining us. Together with governors and deputy governors of central banks from across the continent, please, let's make them welcome with a round of applause. Thank you for joining us yet again. And so we're gradually coming to the end of today's first session. We've heard about AI, open finance, value creation, building Africa's intelligence economy. And new things have come up, such as central bank, digital currency, stable coins, Africa's financial future. The big question here is how can African countries position themselves in a fragmented global system where digital currencies may redefine trade, settlements, and influence? Well, the answers lie with a very spirited and knowledgeable panel. It's my pleasure to invite, as they take their place here, the Chief Executive Officer, FINCRA Ghana, Yao Amoa Edum Atta. He's joined by the President and Chief Growth Officer, Stellar Development Foundation, Jose Fernandez da Ponte. We make welcome the Chief Executive Officer, WeWire, Ebenezer Gane. Okay. I thought that was his AI version going. We make welcome Dominic Owusu, is the Director, Currency Management at the Bank of Ghana. And ladies and gentlemen, moderating this panel, founder, Time Pledge, and Senior Advisor, Global Finance and Technology Network, Matteo Rizzi. Ladies and gentlemen, Ebenezer Gane, Chief Executive Officer, WeWire, together with our moderator, Matteo. You have 30 minutes. Take it away.
Okay. It's not a very diverse panel, is it? We need to make it up to the crowd. Let's start with 1 minute each because the topic is already kind of austic. So let's figure out why we are sitting in this chair. Your start. 1 minute, please, each.
Right. Good morning, guys. So my name is Yao. I'm the CEO of FINCRA Ghana. FINCRA is a company that builds powerful rails in view of stablecoin, cryptocurrency. We are large in cross-border remittances. We have one of the largest pool when it comes to FX within African markets. And one of the most things we do quite efficiently is building rails for off and on-ramp services for the corridors in Africa. Basically, that is it.
Thank you. Jose.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jose Fernandez da Ponte. I'm the president of the Stellar Development Foundation. For those of you who don't know, Stellar is a blockchain. It's a layer 1 blockchain that was built specifically for payments and financial services. We've been around for more than 12 years now, and we've done a ton of work around stablecoins, asset management, asset issuance, and a lot of work in the continent as well. And thrilled to be here with all of you.
So my name is Dominic Owusu, Director of Currency, Bank of Ghana. Background, engineering, now into finance. So I issue the money you spend locally in Ghana.
The one who did the least presentation, Dominic. Thank you. Ebenezer.
Hi, my name is Ebenezer Gane, founder of WeWire. We are into B2B cross-border payments, and we pride ourselves as Ghana's biggest in that space. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for being brief and on point. So, CBDC may be together with the word stablecoin is like the biggest word in the buzzwords bingo of every conference. Actually, when you start as a central bank to implement a CBDC, you potentially maybe pick size, geopolitical size, technical size, standardize the risk, right? Why is it so important? I want to start with Dominic, that when we were preparing the panel, we were saying, wait a second, I wanna 2 minutes or so lay the land a little bit because the CBDC might be too hostile for a good part of the crowd. Please.
So CBDC is central bank digital currency. So it's a dematerialized version of the cash we spend. So digital cash issued by the authority mandated as cash issuance. CBDC is not crypto. The difference between CBDC and crypto is that crypto is private, CBDC is central bank. What is the difference between CBDC and stable coins? So stable coins are crypto, but I would say that it's non-volatile crypto. Non-volatile, stable, the word stable coin. So in the case of CBDC, we are all aware that the central bank has piloted CBDC, and we did it, I think, a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, and we are thinking of evolution, how we take the next step. CBDCs are currently, in the past, it was quite something, which was theoretical, but currently we have Sandbox in South America. We have eNaira just in our neighborhood, which I don't know how it's performing now. We have quite a number of them in China and in Asia. So CBDCs are there now. But Central Bank of Ghana, we are still looking at the way forward.
Great. Jose, what is the opportunity that CBDCs might represent for this continent?
So as Dominic was saying, CBDC is the characteristical definition, and the characteristic of CBDCs is being central bank money. You need to think, we talk about money sometimes in casual speak interchangeably, but there are at least three kinds of money, right? You have central bank money, so physical cash and central bank reserves. You have commercial bank money, which is deposits in the bank. You have electronic money, which is your wallet in your mobile money wallet or your PayPal wallet. All those three types of money, they're going to have a tokenized version. CBDCs are the tokenized version of central bank money. There will be tokenized deposits, so commercial bank money that is tokenized, and stable coins are that tokenized version of electronic money. What is the opportunity and why are they useful? A big part of that is mobility and interoperability and access. In many markets, we have the benefit that we're able to see what's going on in about 200 markets around the world. We see 2 or 3 relevant use cases that are happening today for stablecoins, less so for CBDCs because they are less extended. One of them is trading in crypto markets. A significant amount of stablecoins today are the cash counterpart, the settlement asset for crypto trading markets, which is a fairly niche business to be in. Then you have P2P payments, cross-border payments, that people sending money to friends or family or paying each other. Very prominent use case in many African countries that we see. And probably the fastest growing bit of all is business-to-business payments across borders. So there is, when you look at cross-border payments in the traditional sector through the system of corresponding banks and nostro-vostro accounts, the system works. If you need to pay somebody in a different country, you can pay, the money will get there. It's still relatively slow, it's still relatively expensive. And what we're seeing especially in many markets in Southeast Asia, is a big demand from merchants who want to get paid earlier, and they're moving those payment flows to stable coins. So less dependence on dollars in some cases, which is a driver behind some of the CBDC initiatives. So sovereignty in that sense is one of the components of it, but especially in terms of digital cash and tokenized is settlement asset against a tokenized version of a money market fund or something different. Peer-to-peer payments, cross-border payments for small and medium-sized businesses.
All right, I'd like to engage the audience a bit. How many of us use mobile money? So a greater number of people use mobile money, myself included. So we all use some form of electronic money, which is considered stable currency. Just that mobile money you use today is built at around one issuer, which is a telco network that issues it. It's closed-looped. No one can see how much has been printed unless they publish audited accounts. But stable currency brings that on-chain. What that means is anyone can be able to see how much has been issued and can be able to verify it on-chain. So players in the space, we don't like to consider stable currencies as crypto because it throws people way off because crypto has not done well in terms of publicity. But we consider it as electronic money just as mobile money issuance or digital money.
Yeah, right. So, in my opinion, stablecoin has come to play a vital role within how trades are made across cross-border, so to say. Prior to now, even as I speak today, SWIFT has been the largest platform for exchanges that is sending money across borders. But with the introduction of CBDCs as well as stablecoin, some of these switches are going to happen in view of how cross-border is seen. It's swifter, faster, more reliable. For instance, someone can have goods packed in the port and is waiting to pay via SWIFT, and that can take 3 days. And tomorrow starts catching in. The person now begins to incur more costs. But with stablecoin, it's faster, and it's real time, and it's more safer. So that's my opinion on that so far.
Go, Dominic.
Okay, so let me throw a bit more light on CBDC, mobile money, and crypto. So CBDC is the technology could be blockchain, just like crypto. So CBDC, you could have varying technology, which is, underneath it, like Filia, the one we did in Ghana, it was based on Filia technology. You could also, the Nigerian CBDC was based on blockchain. The same way that, crypto are basically blockchain. But let's look at CBDC. It's central bank issued money. So it's just like cash, but dematerialized version of the cash. Just like currently, mobile money is sitting on the cash in the account. Mobile money, therefore, becomes a derivative. It's not the cash itself that BOG issues, but it's a derivative of the cash. So what is going to happen between CBDC and mobile money? What we should appreciate is that CBDC is not supposed to be competing with mobile money. It's supposed to be like the underlying asset on which mobile money will be built. And the central bank is just supposed to give us the platform, the architectural platform for the fintechs to work. I think that's what I want to ask.
Sorry, can I ask a question? Please.
It's so good when the moderator doesn't need to do any job, So it's exactly how I like my speaker to be. Go ahead, please.
I think I want to ask a question for the audience, which is, we know or it's believed that central banks these days, when you say you're issuing money or printing money, doesn't have to be physical money being printed. So can you differentiate between electronically printing money into the ecosystem and CBDC for us?
Okay, so in terms of money printing, is this not changing the discussions?
I believe if you are issuing a CBDC, you are printing money. If that basis is correct, then...
Okay, so in that case, CBDC will be printing money because instead of printing the money to issue, you will mint the electronic version of the money and issue. So it's just the physical money that you will not issue, but the CBDC will still be the money that is a legal tender that is issued by the central bank, but not necessarily ordering from a physical printing machine.
Predictably, the word stablecoin came out pretty fast in the conversation. And it seems like today, using stablecoin rails is quietly sort of an underground of new spaghetti network, very often, developed by fintechs, some bigger than others, allow me to say so, but hardly structured, or interoperable technically, because a lot are like doing point to point. So my question is, what is the role of the traditional financial institutions, including the regulators? Who will own or regulate, if needed be, but How do you see this revolution building up? I am really tempted to ask the central bank first.
Okay, so I hope I got the question right. But in terms of, we know that technology is the bedrock of innovation. And once we innovate, we leverage on technology to make sure that our livelihoods, that the socio-economic outcomes are improved. That is a fact. And that hinges on financial inclusion, which also, leverages on innovation to ensure that at the end of the day, poverty is alleviated. But behind it, the question is, how can we innovate? Make sure that we improve the livelihood of the people with innovation and still maintaining our monetary sovereignty. How can we maintain our monetary sovereignty? Do we maintain these monetary sovereignties in vacuum, in silos, or we need to get them interconnected? We say that sovereignty is not decided, it is not declared, but it is designed. And whoever owns or controls the rails of money does not only facilitate trade, but holds power. The question that we need to ask ourselves as Africans is that to what extent are we innovating? Are we building all these sovereignty blocks, but still making sure that these logical boundaries are removed so that we can have an overarching, multifaceted, ecosystem, blockchain, interconnected, that will give us seamless, transfers, connections with no challenges. I think that is what, as a central bank, we are looking at, but still also making sure that these systems are regulated. We are conservative. We'll let the private people innovate on us, but we make sure that regulation becomes key.
I want to listen to what the fintech has to say. Yeah.
Right. So I just want to give a bit of a context before I jump into the real question. So Ghanaians or Africans in general, especially again, just use Nigeria and Ghana, have been heavily invested in the private sector when it comes to stablecoin or cryptocurrency, with or without the central banks involvement. So it's quite a very innovative way of looking at things when central bank now begins to come into the whole scene and trying to bring some sort of regulations, because I can give Ghana, for instance, we have most close to 3-something million users using cryptocurrency, unregulated. And so what happened then is that money leaves the position of the banks into Momo accounts and using that to do the trade-offs. And so the on-ramp service happens between that and then the Momo account, even so through to the Binances and then the exchanges. The issue here is that banks were losing money because we don't know where the money is going. It's going in ways that are not reported. They don't have controls over that. So Ghana taking the charge and leading that last December, coming up with the stablecoin, virtual assets framework, is in the right direction in a way of controlling that. But real power is with those who are doing the last mile termination, as well as those who are controlling the liquidity pool. So you look at someone like Binance, that has one of the big exchanges. Yellow Card is one of the also great exchanges. These are entities with large liquidity pool that can support the transactions right from start to the last mile termination. Then comes into the ecosystem of those of us in the PSP's framework, where we are now doing the last mile termination. So real power, one is with one who has the liquid pool in cash management, and the second, the one controlling the last mile termination. In my opinion, these are the true controllers. However, the central bank plays a very good role in bringing the framework that makes it legal, and also assuming someone is duped in that process, can report to a central bank for some sort of mitigation.
Yeah, it's funny how a lot of bankers I speak to feel like their job is going away. But I say this, that if you pick up the flow of funds, whether my brother here has just mentioned that money moves from the banks to mobile money networks. But the question is, the money moves from banks to mobile money networks. That mobile money networks have their reserves still sitting in the banks. So the money didn't move. It's just an electronic version that moves somewhere. And also the mobile money networks are also licensed players. So there's not a vacuum being created or money is not moving from the ecosystem. It's the format in which it's delivered that changes. So at the end of the day, reserves still sit to the bank. Stable currency issuers will still need banks to keep their deposits in. Stable currency, for example, if they are enhanced PSPs or switches to be created, they will still need banks. So banks will not go away. So I tell this to say that bankers should not be scared about the technology. They should rather embrace how their business model is going to change and adapt to that change.
And so in terms of the regulation, the role of the central bank and stable coins, I think from seeing what happens in other markets, there are at least 3 places where the regulator interacts with the stable coin. The first one is by providing guidance and clarity to the private sector, whether this is something that you can do or you cannot do. I live in the US. I've spent the last 5 years involved in the stablecoin debate in the US. There was a legislation that was passed by the US Congress in mid last year called the Genius Act, which basically regulates how you can do stablecoins in the US. There is a before and after in terms of institutional interest before the legislation and after the legislation, because there's traditional financial institutions are going to be, and rightly so, conservative, and they want to make sure that when they enter space, that is well regulated, that there is clarity, that they can engage with the regulator, say, we're doing this is all by the book. So that signaling that this is an instrument that you can use is very, very, very important in terms of guidance to the market. The second one is the architecture of the regulation itself. So what are the characteristics that an issuer needs to have? What are the capital requirements? What are the redemption requirements? What are the anti-money laundering and KYC obligations? Very importantly, what are the reserves? Sometimes in the debate of stablecoins, people misunderstand what decentralized is. The degree of decentralization in most of the stablecoins that matter, they are fiat-backed, meaning that if I am in the US, I use $1 of fiat currency to buy $1 of a stablecoin that is regulated by the US. Basically, the issuer of the stablecoin will give me a token worth $1 of that stablecoin and put $1 into bank accounts and treasuries. So by design, that reserve is centralized. So if the regulator wants to have access to those reserves, they are held at regulated financial institutions. And the third part where that has to be regulated is the on-ramps and the off-ramps, the connectivity between fiat and stablecoin, because eventually the money that is denominated in stablecoins need to be able to get in and get out and go back to traditional financial accounts. There is a lot of debate about whether stablecoins are a threat to bank deposits. I don't think that is the case. Eventually, the money will move fluidly between bank accounts and stablecoins. And how does that get regulated and making sure that there is no slippage or excessive fees when you're going between fiat and digital is another part where the regulator has a ton to say.
Yes, so I think he's right. It doesn't affect bank deposits, but the question for us 3i African Summit for us is that who gets the real benefit from stable coins that are hinged or that is hinged on foreign currencies? I think the challenge we have is that most of these stable coins are not issued and the underpinning assets is not coming from our part of the world. It's based on foreign currencies. So I think what we need to do as Africans, for that unified, ecosystem, is to make sure that we also issue stable coins that is hinged on materials like gold, oil that are produced in Africa. Then we derive the real benefits so that we don't sit here and use it and somebody gets the full benefit from it. Thank you.
The good news is that, Dominic, you rightly followed the fil rouge of the conversation and spoiled the next question, which was about actually the role that Africa as a continent can have, right? So 54 countries, 30-something currencies, a lot of tokenizable potential natural resources. So how big and feasible is the opportunity for Africa to lead and become a model, for digital currencies adoption with true interoperability, right? Which means as well, and digital identity interoperable. There are a number of challenges, right? So how do you see, the challenges and opportunity of this? Where do you think is the balance? And what is you, meaning the four of you, anarchically, whomever wants to start can start. Go.
Okay, I'd like to start on that. So yesterday, during the panel discussion here, I heard quite a lot of information that we can really help this panel. One of them happens to be the fact that the rails or the tech stack is not a problem. The real challenge is borderlines. That is political. So if the various presidencies and the central banks within African corridors can find an alignment, how we can agree on how we can trade cross-border, it makes the usage of stablecoin quite easy within African belt. Because yes, Africans have the technology. We have very good tech stack in Ghana, very good tech stack in South Africa, in Nigeria, across different corridors. The main challenge is political, geopolitical challenges. That I believe that if they can align on that with the tech stack, we can become one of the biggest giants in view of stablecoin within the continent of this world.
Okay, so currently, the payment infrastructure globally is anchored on traditional systems like SWIFT, which is one of the main systems, which is westernized. We have a few regional ones like UPI, India, SIPS in China, SEPA, Europe, FedNow, US, which are all regional. What we can see, or what I can see from where we sit, is that CBDC offers a new opportunity for us to redefine our future as Africa within the global financial architecture. CBDC offers this opportunity to break all these barriers. So let me share just something with you. And when we are also building the CBDC, sometimes the interesting thing is that I'm an engineer. Sometimes when I walk on the street, somebody asks me that, what have you built before as an engineer? With all the universities we have in Africa, if we cannot take the mandate and hold the bull by the horn and develop an African sovereign CBDC that breaks political barriers, then who are we? I think some of these platforms, 3i, should inspire us. I think we had a number of governors coming here. Some of the milestones, I don't know if Oreku is around, some of these platforms must live with a milestone that by the next fintech 3i, we will have this done. And then we start having the teams. We have good universities that has all the technology to do it. What are we waiting for? We must start from a point. So Africa, this is for us to build something phenomenal that Africa can share in the whole world. And you know one interesting thing? When we do that, we will not just be listeners on the negotiating table. We will negotiate with our terms. Thank you very much.
Jose.
So Dominic was saying that earlier. Local currency denominated digital instruments are important. They are very important. The vast majority of stablecoins today are denominated in dollars. I think that's a starting point. It's not an end point. It's an artifact of the initial use case, which were crypto trading markets, which are denominated in dollars. But we are already starting to see local currency instruments popping up in different regions. We see that in Mexico, one of the companies on the Stellar ecosystem, Etherfuse, is dedicated to tokenizing Mexican bonds so people can have access to peso-denominated currency. We see euro-denominated stable coins that are starting to raise. I know that AllUnity is present at the conference. It's a European company that has issued a euro-backed stablecoin. Euro-backed stablecoins have grown 154% in volume year on year. So it's still small, it's growing. It would be fantastic to see instruments that are denominated in African local currencies, and importantly, that are interoperable. The interoperability of those currencies is very important, because if you need to go to, if you have a slippage, if you lose 3% when you're going from one currency to the other currency, still we're not serving the right purpose. And then there are specific verticals where Africa is leading. One of the things that we see when we are here in Ghana is the vibrancy of the creator economy. Many of those creators still don't have fit-for-purpose instruments to collect payments from outside. Another of the companies that we are involved with, the Akuna wallet here, is dedicated to being able to let those creators collect payments. So both local currency denomination and use cases that are specific for regional use cases, I think that's something where Africa is very well positioned to lead.
And just for your information, I think the Bank of Ghana has issued a gold coin, and central banks normally don't do that. So this is the first of its kind. And the Bank of Ghana, okay, you want to give a round of applause, do it. And also, the Bank of Ghana is also working on tokenizing these gold coins. So that will become, in effect, a stable coin issued by the central bank. And just prepare for it. Thank you.
I would like to end by saying this. We make great strides, but we still build a lot of closed loop systems. We should look at open loop systems. The reason I say this is US is the treasury of the world because 70% of US dollar printed fiscal cash doesn't sit in the US, it sits globally. People trust what they can convert to currencies that have liquidity. Yesterday, I think a colleague from another country came to town. He can't have access to mobile money. He doesn't have a bank account. So I had to use me to get access to cash. Think about it. This same person has USDT or USDC on his phone and has never gone to the United States before because there's accessibility to it. So we should be able to create stable currencies that bring adoption and accessibility to everyone. We are buying into foreign currencies, stable currencies, and increasing the treasury of other nations. Are we opening up our stable currencies infrastructure? Because if stable currencies are backed by treasuries, and Ghana has stable currencies that someone sitting in Hong Kong, anywhere in the world, can purchase into, it's a show of confidence into the economy. So we should be able to build more open loop systems in their place.
You ended up the panel once again in a better way than I would have done. The opportunity is clear and our time is up. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for this beautiful panel. Thank you.
Matthew Rizzi, Yawamwa Edum, Ata, Jose Fernandez, Da Ponte, Ebenezer Gane, and Dominic Owusu. Together, ladies and gentlemen, the dream team for money and diplomacy, CDS, stablecoins, and Africa's financial future. Please, a round of applause for them. And so this brings us successfully to the end of the first part of today's engagement. How many of us have the agenda, the full program? How many of us have it? If you don't, please take your badge, scan the code, unless you're using a YAM. May God help you. You can go to the website also and download the full itinerary. You would love the breakout sessions that are coming up. They are on two fronts. The first part talks about virtual assets. That is happening in Hall 1 at exactly 1:30. The second one is on digital public infrastructure happening in Hall 3 at the same time. We will now break for lunch. Our VIPs will be escorted to the VIP area and all of us will move over to the lunch area. At 1:30 prompt, we begin our breakout sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, bon appetit, but most of all, I wish you fruitful deliberations.